I patiently awaited by the riverbanks while Charlie went to relieve himself. The rain pounded hard towards the poisoned earth, ripping away any life that dared settle in the toxic ground. The waters were murky, the river flowed relentlessly. They had once been so full of life, surrounded by families enjoying their picnics. Now nothing more than a watery grave, destroyed by the ever-present acid rain. It was odd, though, that despite the storm, it hadn't grown in size. It had remained the same, monotonous body of water, only disturbed by the occasional piece of driftwood floating downstream. "Charlie, hurry up, it's getting dark," I yelled to my son as he tried to relieve himself behind a barren tree. "I'm trying," he shouted back. I couldn't blame him. Taking a piss was harder than one would have thought while soaking wet and freezing cold. He turned silent. I decided to give him some space while I rested by the riverbank. My body had grown frail in the past year after these supplies diminished. Both food and water had become a scarce, invaluable resource. I thought it ironic that we would most likely die from dehydration, all the while soaking wet from the sulfuric rain falling down from above. My train of thought was disrupted by what seemed like an oddly shaped tree stump approaching from up the river. I fixed my attention to it as it drifted closer and realized that it wasn't a piece of wood, but a corpse. "Ah, God, not again," I mumbled to myself. It had been flayed from top to bottom, not an inch of skin remaining on its bloody surface. Behind it followed another dozen dead bodies, all floating peacefully on top of the water in various stages of mutilation. All were skinned, but some had additional avulsions, missing arms, legs, even heads that had been violently torn from some of their bodies. At that point, their identities were nothing more than a distant memory, an unimportant detail. They all seemed the same underneath their skin, and now they just added to the pile of corpses in the hellscape of a city that we called home. Those people were the brave ones, the ones that tried to leave but they had known the risk. They knew about the Guardians, yet they ventured across the border and now they were just pieces of meat floating with the river. The way their bodies bobbed up and down in the water reminded me in the most morbid way of times long since past, of the days before the rain, taking Charlie to the beach with his mother, teaching him how to swim. I almost let myself smile despite the horrific sight, but I was quickly jolted back to reality as one of the corpses landed on the riverbank, fully clothed and seemingly unharmed. "Charlie, get over here," I called as I ran for the corpse. It was a man in his early 20s, thick long hair and well-fed. Wherever the river had taken him from, he definitely didn't belong in the city. I checked his pulse, barely finding a weak one, and though unconscious, he was definitely alive. "Dad, what are you doing?" Charlie asked. "We've got a live one. Hand me the blanket." Charlie pulled out a soaking wet piece of cloth, hardly protected from the weather by the bag, but it was all that we had. I wrapped the man in as well as I could and lifted him up on my shoulder. "Dad, what if he's like the others?" Charlie asked nervously. "He can't be, he looks too healthy. Help me carry my things while I carry him. We have to get back to the shelter, fast." We rushed back towards the ruin that we had called home for the past day. It only took an hour to walk through the storm, but in my fragile state, carrying someone as heavy as that man put me on the brink of collapse. Once we had finally reached the house, I dropped the man on the driest part of the floor that I could find, and I started a futile attempt at making a fire while Charlie unpacked our things. "Dad, I'm gonna go look for food," Charlie stated, oddly confident. He had become a resourceful kid, but I had little hope that we would find any treasure. Whoever lived there before had to have emptied the place during the second evacuation. "Nah, don't bother. We already looked through this place." As a stubborn kid, he reminded me of his mother, always adamant about finding solutions where there were none. Against my advice, he set off to search the house once more. After a good half an hour, I managed to get a few sparks to ignite a fire. Charlie returned just in time, holding a few cans of beans and a couple of water bottles. "Where'd you find these?" I asked, equally impressed and surprised. "I found them under some planks in the closet," he said, smiling. People had gotten clever during the storm. As food supplies grew short and we lost contact with the outside world, people got serious about hiding their most valuable belongings. In a world where nothing ever grew, where food couldn't be made, gold and money had lost their purpose. "You did good, Charlie. I'm proud of you." The man grunted, starting to wake up. What happened?" he asked weakly. I knelt down beside him, trying my best to keep him calm. "Hey, don't worry, you're safe. What's your name?" "Peter." "Great, Peter. My name's John. Do you know where you are?" "No, I was out walking. My head, it really hurts." I noticed a gash on the back of his head covered by his hair. It had stopped bleeding, but it was a nasty cut and risk of getting infected. "Was I in an accident? Why am I not in the hospital?" he asked. "Hospital?" I asked back, confused. Before he could continue, he passed back out. I tried to get him to drink some water, most of which he coughed up. Keeping him warm and hydrated was all that I could do while he recovered. Asking for a hospital. He must have been pretty out of it, I mumbled to myself. I turned back to Charlie. He was enjoying his expired can of beans, our first meal in 2 days. Hardly a feast, but that didn't matter. "We need to get to sleep soon, Charlie. We've got a long trek ahead of us tomorrow." "Wait, tell me the story first," he demanded. It was a story that I had told 1,000 times in the past few years, one of the times before the storm. A story about a world that Charlie was far too young to remember, but he had seen a minuscule part of it, and I wanted to keep that glimpse alive, if only as a distant dream. "You want to hear about the sun?" I asked. He nodded happily. "All right, come sit with me. Let's try to get dry before we pass out for the night." We huddled up under the blanket, almost dry from the fire, and for the 1,001st time, I told him about the past. "You know, the sky is blue. Beyond the darkness and thick clouds that we see outside, there's a whole other world without rain, without thunder and lightning. And in the center of it all, we have the sun. It's a bright yellow ball hanging up there, watching over us, keeping us warm. Even now, it's giving us life, but it's not as strong as it used to be. It's hidden, like an invaluable treasure. Many years ago, we lived in the sun with your mother, and we were so happy." I paused for a moment. Talking about my wife was a hard task, considering how we lost her. Charlie didn't remember, of course, but it stung deep inside my chest, like a cold hand wrapping around my aching heart. I sighed before I continued. "She loved taking us out to the beach, endless oceans and soft sand beneath our feet. It was so warm and so bright that we had to eat ice cream just to cool down. Sometimes we even wanted to get wet. We dove into the water, but they weren't dark and grimy. They were crystal clear, blue like the color of your eyes." "But it's all gone now, isn't it?" "I'm sure it's out there somewhere, and I promise you, as soon as we can find a way past the Guardians, I'll take you there. You'll see the sun again, Charlie. I promise." I talked more about his mother until he fell asleep. As much as it pained me, I felt it important that he knew what a wonderful woman she was. As night fell over us, the storm worsened, turning from heavy rain to a murderous blizzard. As usual, I found it hard to sleep. always worrying the house might collapse as so many buildings had. But Charlie slept blissfully, too young to comprehend the true dangers of the world. "Dad, Dad, the man is waking up." I awoke to Charlie shaking me. Though I was usually a light sleeper, I somehow barely came to, even as Charlie yelled. Peter was coughing and begging for water. After spending the whole night unconscious, he was finally coming back to it. "Water, water please," he said. I helped him sit up to drink. "How are you feeling?" "Oh man, I'm still here. I thought it was all a dream," he said as he looked around the room. "Are we in an abandoned house or something?" "Well, Peter, it's not abandoned anymore," I joked, stupidly trying to brighten up the mood. "Shouldn't I be in a hospital?" he asked again. I was confused, but he had suffered a fairly traumatic head injury, so I let his question slide while I started breakfast. I cooked up some beans and offered them to Peter. Without supplies, I couldn't do much for his wound, only observe and hope a fever didn't fester. "Do you know where we are?" I asked, trying to get an idea of his state of mind. "I don't know. I don't remember anything other than walking around. I was heading for a picnic, I think, and then there was a bright flash and the next thing I know, I wake up here." "A picnic?" "Yeah, it's been the warmest summer in years, they say. I wanted to enjoy the weather, but by the look of that rain outside, I guess that didn't last very long." Warm summer picnics. It had become clear how confused he really was. "We're in Greenville," I said. "Greenville? I've never heard that name. I'm from Portland." Portland wasn't anywhere nearby. Closest town over would have been Clint, but God knows what still existed beyond the boundaries of our hellhole. "And you have sun in Portland?" "Yeah, blazing, burning sun, every day for the past month." For a moment, I considered the fact that the world had kept going long after our city's demise, that despite our hardship, there existed a better place where life thrived. Yet I knew leaving would be impossible. "You're telling me the world is still going, that outside of this shit, people are living normal lives?" Of course. We've never even heard about a storm destroying a city. Nobody knows about Greenville. This is all just a bit bizarre." I stood up and paced around the room, 1,000 thoughts and ideas flowing through my mind. The world hadn't ended, it was only us, only our city, closed off from the rest of the world and left to suffer. People couldn't leave, but then again, none had entered it either. Since the fall of our city and collapse of the colony, Peter was the first seemingly healthy human that we had stumbled across. If he could get in, then maybe, just maybe, we could get out. "Dad, there's a woman outside," Charlie yelled from one of the windows, breaking me away from my brainstorm. "Stay back, Charlie," I demanded as I rushed outside, Peter getting up and following suit. The rain poured as always, filling up a smaller sinkhole down the end of the street. Most houses had long since collapsed, and those that still stood were slowly being etched away by the acid. A woman stood in the middle of the street with her back facing towards us. She wore nothing more than a light dress, hardly providing protection from the horrific weather. She had been hurt, leaving an exposed wound on her left shoulder, no longer bleeding but oozing with thick yellow pus. "What the hell is she doing just standing there?" Peter asked. "Hey, don't get close, let me deal with it," I responded. I walked up behind the woman. The veins on her arm were protruding out, marking an infection that was growing up towards her neck. She was on the brink of sepsis and would soon perish. Without hesitating, I pulled her head back by her hair. As I did, I also lifted up my hunting knife and I cut her throat. "I'm sorry," I whispered as blood poured down her newly created orifice. She didn't even react as she quickly bled out. Seconds later, she had died, Holy shit, what the hell did you just do? Peter yelled from the house. He stood frozen in fear, staring at my bloody hands. He didn't understand what I had just done. It then dawned on me that Peter truly came from a better place, one without the daily horrors that we faced. I set her free, I responded, already out of breath. Peter turned to run, but I gave chase. Despite my malnourished body and wasted frame, I was far faster in the rain and I quickly pinned him down. "Let go of me, you're crazy," he yelled. "Calm down, Peter, I can explain." "Explain what? You just straight up murdered someone," he continued. I let him go, causing him to slip onto the muddy wet ground. I kept my knife pointed at him, forcing him to stick around a little bit longer. "You really don't know what's going on here, do you?" I asked. Please don't kill me. Just tell me what the hell you want." "Of course I'm not gonna kill you. You're not empty, not like them. Not yet." I flipped my knife around, gesturing for Peter to take it. "Now that I'm unarmed, you're going to listen." He took the knife, clutching onto it with shaking hands. It put me in harm's way, but I felt safe nonetheless. Peter wasn't from around Greenville. He had been sheltered, safe from the nightmare that had been our lives for the past years, meaning that he still didn't have murder in his heart. "Why did you kill her?" he asked with a shaky voice. "Because she was already dead, the parts of her that matters anyway. You notice the wound on her arm, her clear apathy towards it. It's because she's one of them, one of the empty people." "What do you mean, empty people?" I walked back over to the corpse of the thing that I had just killed, turning her over to see her face. Full of scratches, even an eye missing, probably from walking into walls and debris lying around. "It's the rain," I said calmly while presenting the wounds of somebody who had clearly given up on their own well-being. "It changes people, it hollows them out, taking away their memories, stripping them of all emotion. That's the fate of most people living in this city. And whatever they once were, accountants, mechanics, doctors, they ain't anymore. All they do now is walk around, get hurt, and die." "Then why kill them?" "Because they're already gone. Only their bodies stay behind to suffer. The least that we can do is to free them. Besides, they get riled up if disturbed. Sometimes they get violent." He had lowered his guard by then, either from believing my story or because he simply didn't have much of a choice. Peter was trapped alongside us in the storm, unable to survive without my help, but unbeknownst to him, he could be our ticket out of here. "How long have you been here?" was all that he asked. 7 years. Peter collapsed to the ground in disbelief, fearing that he had suffered the same fate. I walked over and put a comforting hand on his shoulder, mustering as much confidence as I could into the next few words. "But now, we're all getting out of here together." My plan was simple enough in theory. Follow the river and retrace its path back towards where it grabbed Peter. It might have given us a safe way to pass the guardians lurking in the dark territory. While we got ready for the day's trek, I felt hopeful. For the first time in about 6 years, I truly believed we stood a chance. And during the early days of the storm, we had all been a part of a mass evacuation. As the first buildings fell to sinkholes created by the downpour, people started to panic. The evacuation itself was a shit show. Thousands of cars immediately congested on the highway. As a last resort, we attempted to flee on foot with the pitch-black clouds looming above us, striking down with lightning every so often, seeming to appear from the ground itself. My family and I were quite far in the back, and when reaching the border out of the city, we halted in our stops. Before us lay thousands of skinless bodies, entire families embraced in death with horrified expressions on their flayed faces. In the blink of an eye, well over 100,000 people had been slaughtered, repurposed for a meat wall spanning around the entire city, keeping us trapped. The mere fact that Peter got inside ignited a fresh wave of hope throughout my body. It meant that there had to be a weak spot in the dark territory, one that we could escape through. Charlie presented us with a few water bottles that he had found while searching the neighboring houses. It wasn't much to keep us going, but I had found a new source of motivation. "So, we're leaving the city?" Peter asked. "That's right. If a better place is out there, I have to get my son to it." "Mind me asking why you haven't left already? I mean, this place isn't all that great." "Well, because it's dangerous, Peter. People have tried and died." "What makes you so sure that we'll survive then?" he asked, looking at me with a mix of fear and confusion. "Because now we know it's possible. You got in, that means we can get out." A few more bodies had landed on the riverbank where we found Peter the day before. Unlike him, they were beyond saving, flayed and mutilated like all the others. Peter looked at them in disbelief and disgust, unable to believe the horrors that lay before him. What happened to them?" he asked. "Those are the people that tried to leave," I said. "And that's where we're heading," he continued, panicked. "Listen to me, Peter. There's no food, no water, nothing left in this city for us. We either take our chances here or we die from thirst and starvation in the city. Remember that you made it in here, and I promise you a better chance if we keep going." We followed the river upstream, half a day's track just to get to the bridge. The rest would be spent crossing it. The bridge was the name given to a collection of sinkholes spanning all around the city, 96 miles wide and 2 miles across, a place of destruction almost impossible to pass. A section of the sinkholes had been covered in various debris, cars and corpses, giving it the unfitting name. Filling it to the brim to the point where we could cross, hence a bridge. Despite its dangerous content, it would be our safest way to the other side. Of course, the empty people looked around the bridge as well, but they were different. Those that existed there still had the basic instinct of escaping, making them far more terrifying than anything found within the city limits. I let my mind wander as we slowly walked by the river. The monotonous flow of water against the harsh trickle of rain was somehow soothing. It brought back memories of the second evacuation and the first empty people. I saw an image of myself holding onto my 3-year-old son with one arm and my wife with the other. We were crushed in the middle of a panicking crowd when my wife Loretta suddenly let go. I tried so desperately to grab a hold of her again, but she simply stood there, letting the crowd trample her down as we were pulled away. She was left behind, one of the first people to forget themselves, to hollow out and become one of the empty people. Most people could feel it coming on, and they knew that they were about to turn, but not her. For whatever reason, it happened within seconds. Following the second failed evacuation, we searched for weeks. Hundreds of colonists looking for their lost loved ones, but to no avail. Loretta was more than likely one of the empties that wandered into harm's way, dying from their own neglect. "Dad, what are you doing?" Charlie asked me as I snapped back to reality. I had stopped moving, lost in my own thoughts, unable to react with the outside world. "Dad!" "John," Peter chimed in. Finally, I managed to get a hold of myself. I'm sorry, I just needed to catch my breath," I lied. "Let's keep moving." Another hour and we finally reached the bridge. Before us, we saw an endless collection of sinkholes, partially filled with solid debris. Dozens of bodies littering the pits among a few surviving stragglers. "This isn't exactly what I had in mind when you said that we had to cross a bridge," Peter said. The river ran straight through the sinkholes, dragging parts of its foundation with it. We had to keep a certain distance away from the river, lest we get dragged away with everything else. This is more like a hole if I'm entirely honest, he continued. I kneeled down beside my son. This would be his first time crossing the bridge without my help. On each prior cross he had been too young and I had carried him on my back, or I had him way back at the colony. Now that the colony was gone and I was too weak to carry him, he would have to manage on his own. You ready to do this, Charlie? I asked. He nodded, as brave as he had ever been. Listen, there's bound to be a bunch of empty people stuck in the debris. It's going to be dangerous. These empties are different from the ones that we've seen in the city. They'll call out for help, they'll beg and bargain, but don't let that fool you. There's no fear, sadness, nor anger in their voices. There will be no urgency even as they lay there bleeding out. So whatever happens, do not approach them, I said, looking back and forth between Peter and Charlie. They both nodded, confused but diligent. We tied a rope between the three of us. Walking 10 feet apart would ensure that if one of us fell into a pit or sank into the unstable ground, the other two could pull them back up. Charlie, being the lightest, walked at the back of our small group while I led the charge. It only took a couple of 100 feet before we saw one of the empty people trapped in a crushed car. Emaciated and pale, probably stuck there for the past year, waiting for someone to pass. It pleaded and begged for us to help, asking in the most apathetic voice possible, completely rid of any emotion. Don't go to the other side without me. I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, it said. Another one we passed had just impaled itself on a piece of debris, bleeding profusely. Within an hour, it would be dead. Yet it kept talking as if nothing had happened. Its words making sense, but the emotion behind them non-existent. Hey, take me with you, please, please, please. It doesn't hurt, I promise. I'll be okay. Peter looked with concern at the trapped creatures, worried and sorry about its pitiful fate. Let it be, I ordered. We can't help them. He complied and we kept walking. John, how about you tell me how all of this happened? Peter asked. I shrugged his curiosity off. It wasn't a memory that I wanted to dig into. We're better off focusing on the rough terrain. We ain't got time to talk. Well, alright, how about a short summary then? I sighed, already out of breath from the rough trek across the bridge, ignoring him initially, but he kept trying. He wasn't going to let it go. They said the storm would pass in the week. I finally uttered after about the 10th time that he had asked. We did as we were told, holding up inside of our home, stocking up on food and water as the worst passed. Only it never did. And after a month of the acidic rain etching away at our once friendly city, buildings started collapsing, sinkholes swallowed the roads, and people died. I sat down on a rock, trying to catch my breath. Talking while wandering was a painful task. And then the people started acting strange. We would find men, women, and children just wandering through the streets at night, wearing nothing more than their nightgowns to protect them from the pouring rain. They had this look in their eyes, as if they weren't aware enough to care about their surroundings. Sometimes they would even get hurt, break a leg or rupture an artery, yet they just kept walking aimlessly around, ignoring our pleas to just come back inside. Peter stepped in front of me. Is that what happened to your colony? He asked. Our colony was formed after the first 6 months. We had gathered as many resources as we could, non-perishable foods and water. Since only 1,000 people survived the first 2 evacuations, we figured we would be fine for a few years at least. But the rain kept pouring. We had lost contact with the outside world, and anyone brave enough to venture into the dark zone ended up dead. We were trapped. scared and running out of supplies faster than we had anticipated. You know what happens when there's no system to keep people in place? Peter shook his head. I got back up on my feet and we kept moving. Well, let's say the empty people weren't the only ones losing their sense of self. A small group of empty people started getting close. They had miraculously navigated across the bridge without getting impaled or hurt by the various debris. They kept mumbling nonsense as they walked past, but the only word I could make out was salvation. Let 'em be, I demanded. Parker kept inquiring about our situation. So you've been stuck here for the past 7 years, he asked. Yeah, that's right. 7 years since the storm began in 2020. Peter stopped dead in his tracks, halting our progress. What the hell do you mean 2020? The year, what else? I asked, confused. You're saying the storm started 7 years ago in 2020, making the current year 2027. Well, by my estimation, yeah. It's been a bit hard to keep track, but I'm pretty sure we're either in July or August. Why do you ask? John, it's only 2019. I chuckled at the absurd statement. Listen, Peter, you hit your head pretty hard. It's understandable that you're confused. Look at me, John. I was born in 1995. Do I look like I'm in my mid-30s? He asked. He didn't. He looked like somebody in their early 20s, and just like I thought when I first found him. Yet it made no sense if it truly was that long ago for him. That it meant that he had traveled not only from outside but from the past. You really think you traveled through time? I asked, sounding more condescending than intended. Well, is that less likely than a storm lasting 7 years? People turning empty and mysterious guardians hindering any escape? He asked back. Despite my disbelief in his statement, he had a point. But that means, I stopped. Means what, John? It means the world truly is gone. Well, then how did I get here? He said, getting more agitated by the minute. I don't know, but the plan stays the same. We keep moving across the bridge. Towards what? Certain death, to be flayed by the guardians like the pile of corpses back at the river. I don't know, I shouted back, loud enough to attract the attention of the passing empty people, most stuck in debris by then. Peter got quiet. But do you have a better plan? There's no food left, no water, nothing. You want to go back? We'll die before we find shelter again. So my plan remains. We're following the river, and while we do, we desperately pray to any god that you can think of that we somehow manage to find out how the hell you ended up here. He just stared at me. 7 years, Peter. My son grew up not knowing the warmth of the sun, and I'll die before he gets stuck here for the rest of his life. While I frantically yelled in anger, one of the empty people got close enough to grab Charlie. I had lost focus and just stared at him in complete apathy. For a moment, it didn't matter what happened next. Help me, help me, help me, let's stick together. It begged as it pulled him towards a pit. I just stared. Dad, help me! Charlie cried, but I stared on, unable to make myself move. John, what the hell are you doing? Peter shouted as he ran over to help Charlie. Finally, I snapped back to reality, immediately pulling my knife out, pushing the creature away from my son while impaling it through its eye. As it fell over dead, Charlie cried for the first time in years, and Peter turned to me with an angry expression on his face. John, why did you just stand there? He shouted. I don't know. I rushed over to console Charlie, but he pushed me away. I lost myself for a moment. I can't explain it. We didn't have time to discuss it. Darkness loomed over us as nightfall approached. After catching our breaths once more, we rushed the last few hundred feet across. We desperately needed to find shelter before another blizzard set in. No sooner had we set foot on the edge of the bridge before a brilliantly bright light appeared on the horizon. It was unlike anything that I had seen since the beginning of the storm, approaching as a blue sun lighting up everything around us. The light looked as cold as ice, yet it warmed us more than anything had for the past 7 years. The river stretched all the way towards the light, and I knew in my heart that Peter had somehow come through it. "Is that the sun?" Charlie asked hopefully. No, that's something else entirely," I responded, baffled by the magnificent sight. "How far away is it?" Peter asked. I tried to the best of my ability to judge the distance, but the shine of the light made it hard to get a clear view. If it lay just by one of the bodies of water making up the river, it would be another day's trek, meaning that we would have to venture through the dark territory. "I'm guessing another day and a half's walk," I finally said. They both seemed hopeful. The terrain itself wasn't as rough as the rest of the trip, but I was beginning to realize that I might not make it that far. In any case, we'll need to find shelter. We're not traversing the dark territory at night. We searched for an hour before finding a partially collapsed warehouse. Not a great cover for the oncoming blizzard, but it was the best that we could do in the outskirts of town. I lit a fire for the night and I shared the last can of beans. "I'm sorry about earlier," I said to Charlie. "It's okay," Charlie said half asleep. "Can you tell me a story?" That night, as Charlie fell asleep, for the first time I told him a story about the future and not the past. "I love you. Be good, kid." I remained awake, staring into the embers as the blizzard raged outside. My mind wandered. I tried to keep it focused, but to no avail. I saw images of my wife, memories of digging sandcastles on the beach with Charlie, flashes of wine and dances, the past of a better life. I was tired, worn down to the bone, hollowed out by the rain like so many people before me. In a matter of hours, my mind would be lost and my son would be left alone, fending for himself with someone who clearly didn't belong. Without waking the other two, I sat down to write the final part of my journal. I've kept track of most of the events during the past 7 years, but I feel like the last 2 days are the most important. I'm leaving this to you, Peter, when you find me empty in the morning. I need you to take Charlie with you across the dark territory. Bring him to the light and cross over to a better world. He might even have the chance to stop this all from happening. Charlie, I love you. Be good and live a happier life in the sun. I wish I could be there with you until the end, but my time is up. You deserve so much more than this world has given you, and now you might finally have it. Good luck to you both. John. When morning rolled around, John had left, either to keep us safe or because he had hollowed out and gone to face the rain one last time. He pulled me out of the river, he saved my life, and in return I promised to keep Charlie safe. He left behind his journal, which is what you've all just read, and while there's a lot more to my and Charlie's story, I felt that this should be what I post first. John deserved that much. I awoke in the early hours the following morning. Charlie was frantically calling out for his father. John had left his bed and seemingly vanished, leaving his journal neatly placed by my bedside. We searched the warehouse before I even checked what John had written, but he wasn't inside. I picked up the journal and I opened it. I only needed to read the first few lines to realize what had happened. John had turned empty and left instructions to me telling me to save Charlie. "Dad!" Charlie yelled as he stormed out the door back into the rain. John was standing motionless outside, staring towards the horizon. He didn't even react to Charlie's plea for attention. "Dad, what are you doing?" he continued on the verge of tears. He walked towards John, though whatever John had been just a day before, he had been washed away by the heavy rainfall. "Charlie, stay away from John," I yelled as I ran over to grab him. "Let me go," he said as he tried to wriggle himself loose from my grip. "Dad," he cried. John hadn't moved, not even acknowledging our presence. "No!" He kept screaming as I pulled him back inside the warehouse and shut the door. He was incredibly strong for a 10-year-old, but I kept him at bay while he cried and punched me. "He's gone, Charlie. John is gone." No, he isn't. He can't be. He promised." He continued sobbing incomprehensibly. I held him tight and I let him cry it out, and he eventually stopped resisting my grip. The one person in his life had been taken away for no reason other than bad luck, simply wasted away in a world where humanity had become little more than a faint memory. Charlie sat by the fire, reading John's journal. He silently sobbed as he turned the pages. He had learned to read from his father, and he had written the journal as a reminder of what they had gone through, in hopes that one day someone would save them. "I'm sorry about your dad, Charlie." He didn't respond. I packed what little things that we had into John's bag. We had to keep walking while we still had the energy. Without food nor water, this would be our last day, whether we found salvation or not. When we finally got back outside, John had wandered off. I had the thought of killing what remained of him in the back of my head, to free him like he had taught me, but now I wouldn't get that chance. "Thanks for saving me, John. You were a good man," I mumbled to myself. The light shined bright in the horizon, reflecting off the millions of raindrops appearing as endless beams shooting through the air. Despite the cold blue color, it made me feel warm to once again wander through light, to once again see the landscape in front of me. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked Charlie. He looked at me for a brief moment and shook his head. The river got wider as we proceeded. In the distance, something that looked like a wall appeared, spanning endlessly in each direction around the city. "What's that wall?" I asked. "It's the flesh. That's where the dark territory begins," he responded quietly. Faint clicking sounds could be heard in the distance, distorted echoes coming from whatever lurked in the rain. A few empty people wandered alongside us on our journey. Too many to kill, and they seemed oblivious to our company. They had come from all directions, but each were pulled towards the light. On the road, several emaciated figures lay motionless. They had become too weak to move. Only their blinking eyes proved that they were still alive. When we got close enough to see the wall, I could make out figures, limbs, viscera, and torn flesh that made out the majority of the wall. Charlie barely acknowledged the horror before us, unafraid and apathetic to it. If he was just a brave kid or on the brink of turning empty, I couldn't tell. Some of the empties were attempting to climb the wall, but its slippery surface caused them to slip and sink into the meat-filled mass. The only opening was by the river. Piles of dead people littered the water, but the wall wasn't as thick around it. We could pass easily through. As we walked around on the riverside, the clicking got louder. It was rhythmic and split up into intervals. Though I couldn't exactly determine its origin, it came from several directions as if something was communicating. On the other side of the wall, we were faced with a new type of nightmare. The entire land had turned into an impossible fleshscape, with what appeared as muscles, tendons, and blood vessels covering every inch of its surface. A single empty person made it above the wall and wandered across the flesh. Tendrils entangled in vessels reached out from the ground and grabbed onto the empty, pulling them down to the ground, slowly consuming and merging them with itself. "How are we going to get through here?" I asked. Charlie didn't respond. He simply climbed down from the wall, wielding his knife. A few tendrils grew from the ground, wrapped in veins, but Charlie slashed at them with his knife, causing blood to spurt out briefly before it fell to the ground. "Charlie, what are you doing? They can't get us if we keep moving," he said. "You've been here before?" I asked. "One time." I climbed down onto the flesh-covered surface. It felt warm to the touch, gently bouncing my feet with each step. A tendril reached for me and I slashed it off with ease. It was slow for sure, and as long as we kept wandering, we would seemingly be safe. The light was still a few hours away, but it had grown to a tremendous size, a brilliant blue globe lighting our path to salvation. We kept close to the river. If John had been right, we simply needed to follow it all the way to the light. Every now and then, a body, limb, or viscera was pulled from the fleshscape and floated downstream towards the city. The clicking was getting closer, but I was just starting to realize that it didn't come from any direction in the distance. It was coming from underground. That's the first time I noticed how the ground twitched and contracted in response to our steps. It hadn't occurred in the early stages of the dark territory, but now it had become impossible to ignore. "Charlie, hold up." "What?" We both stopped walking, but the twitching continued, going from minor tics to violent spastic contractions. Some muscle fibers in the ground opened up beneath our feet, and we pulled away towards the river. "Watch out," I yelled. "What's happening?" he asked back. A tall figure dug itself from the ground, towering 15 feet tall, 2 legs and a torso but without arms or a head. Its skin seemed charred black, vesicles covering the majority of its surface. It emitted the clicking sound that we had heard, calling out for the tendrils which emerged from the ground in response. It held onto the ground with its legs, claws sticking out from all sides of the stumpy appendage. "Run," I ordered. I grabbed Charlie and headed straight for the river. It was the only place that I could think to hide, and since the flesh didn't grow much into the water, I hoped it could incense us there. The creature wandered across the meat-covered land, turning its charred torso around while searching for whatever had awoken it, looking for us. Beneath the pitch-black skin of the creature, a couple of lids tore apart, revealing a single, completely white eye with a minuscule pupil darting rapidly around in its socket. We lowered ourselves into the water, hoping the creature wouldn't notice us. As long as we didn't touch the flesh, hopefully it could incense us. "What the hell is that thing?" I whispered. "It's a guardian." The commotion had attracted a couple of empty people, both relatively unharmed even on the fleshscape. The ground twitched beneath their feet as they approached the creature. It observed them for a brief moment before grabbing one of them with a foot, and in a single swift movement, it tore the empty person in half. Its leg then started expanding, and its flesh wrapped around the half that it still held onto. Within a second, the skin had been seared off by acid, seeping out through the bursting vesicles on the creature's skin, after which it dumped the flayed person to the ground, letting the flesh fuse together. After less than a minute, both empties had been flayed and consumed, and the creature seemed content, but the original disturbance caused by us still lingered on its mind, and it kept searching while we hid quietly in the river. We must have hung on to the edge of the river for an hour while the creature searched, all the while its eye remained open, unblinking, desperately looking for intruders. After a while, the clicking stopped and the tendrils sunk back into the ground. After the last tendril had disappeared, the guardian closed its eye and simply started sinking back into the ground, leaving the surface monotonous and empty once more. Relieved, I let out a sigh. The river, despite its strong current, would be our safest option proceeding ahead. Alright, we better keep moving, but we can't walk on the land anymore. Those things can sense our touch. Charlie nodded, shivering from the freezing water. But while the fleshscape stretched endlessly far, impossible to traverse, the light itself was close within reach. If we kept moving, we would be there in an hour. I dug out a rope from our backpack and tied it between myself and Charlie. The water wasn't very deep near the edge, but sudden surges in the current could easily sweep one of us away, especially a small, malnourished kid like Charlie. "I'm really cold," he said. "We're almost there, Charlie. Can you hang on for just a bit longer?" "I'll try." We walked in the knee-deep, freezing water, trying our best to avoid small flesh appendages that had grown into the side of the river. Any touch would alert the guardians, and if they saw us, we wouldn't stand a chance. "Hey, just a bit further, we're almost there," I said. Charlie had started slowing down. As skinny as he was, on the brink of starvation, he simply couldn't keep retaining much heat. "I'm tired," he said. "Don't give up, Charlie," I begged. I felt him tug on the rope behind me. He had almost come to a complete standstill. Without any better option, I lifted him up and put him on my back. We were so close. The light shined brighter than ever before, and it warmed me up to the point where I barely felt the freezing temperature of the water anymore. But why didn't it work for Charlie? "Charlie, we're almost there." He didn't respond. He had fallen unconscious from the cold and exhaustion. "Charlie!" I upped my pace, but the current had gotten stronger, and the end of the river finally met us. What lay before us was a massive lake, covered by a thin layer of what seemed like human skin, stretched so thin that it had become partially transparent. The blue light hung a few feet in the air on the other side of the lake, appearing as a massive globe of ice. "Charlie, do you see that? We're almost home." He didn't respond. We had to tread back onto land to get around the lake. If not, we would end up enveloped in the mesh of skin covering the waters. Only a few hundred yards to safety. I stepped onto the riverbank, and the ground immediately twitched in reaction. I took another step, causing a tendril to emerge from the ground and reached for me. It was much thicker than the ones that we had faced before, and I only had one hand free while trying to keep Charlie on my back. I swung with all my force and I cut through it. The ground shook as the muscles moved apart, leaving a large gash in the ground from where the guardians could emerge. 3 pulled themselves up through the flesh and gave chase after us. They were tall, much larger than before, but to our advantage, they were also slower. Even with Charlie on my back, I could outrun them, but not for long. Several tendrils extended from the ground, not trying to grab myself, but going directly for Charlie. A few clung on, and I swung at them, severing a few. On my second swing, one grabbed the shaft of my knife, cutting it into itself, but causing me to let go of it. "Hang on, Charlie," I yelled as I ran, my lungs almost bursting from the effort. The guardian seemed bizarrely slow, quickly giving up on the chase as we got closer to the light. I peeked back at them and they seemed almost frozen, as if covered in ice emerging from the blue light. Despite the guardian struggling, the tendrils kept growing in number and size, grasping for us as we spurted over the fleshscape. Charlie started coming to it as we got closer to the glowing globe. He moaned quietly in agony. "The light, it hurts." He cried out as we got closer. It was horribly bright, almost blinding, yet nothing could compare to the beauty. Its magnificent contrast to its horrible surroundings. Whatever pain it caused Charlie, it was better than staying behind to be flayed by the monsters. One of the tendrils caught my leg, causing me to stumble to the ground and dropping Charlie. Another grabbed him where he lay on the ground. I kicked and tore at its flesh. Finally, it let me go, but it had grabbed Charlie around his neck, choking away the little life that he had left. Even with all my force, I couldn't tear it away, and as a last resort, I simply bit it. A metallic taste filled my mouth as blood spurted from the twisted appendage. I spit it out and lifted Charlie off the ground. My muscles burned and my joints ached, but I kept moving, dragging my beaten body across the ground. I got a bit further before collapsing to the ground. The light hung just a few feet above us, but I couldn't bring myself back on my feet. I reached out my hand, trying to grab the light, and suddenly I felt the ground give in beneath me. We were being lifted up towards it. "We made it, Charlie," I said, on the brink of passing out. The blue light started enveloping us. All the pain and fear that had filled my body started to vanish. I looked around for Charlie. I had held onto his hand, but I couldn't see him anymore. "Charlie!" The last thing that I heard was a scream of agony coming from Charlie. He was falling back through the light towards the fleshscape. I frantically tried to grab onto him, but the light was too bright. I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, nor feel at all anymore. It was as if the world had been erased and myself with it. And then I fell. Even now, I can't tell how far I fell. It could have been a few feet, it could have been miles. All I remember is hitting the ground hard, my body breaking as I landed in a different world. I lay motionless, unable to breathe. As my vision returned, I saw a brilliant blue sky, cloudless, only decorated with our yellow, majestic sun. I laughed. I was back. I was safe. After a horrific ordeal, I could finally rest. And with that, I let myself pass out. They found me lying in the middle of a football field. 2 broken legs, a few ribs, and multiple vertebrae. Bruises, torn ligaments, and a punctured lung. I had been beaten up quite badly by the fall, but despite it all, I had survived. "Charlie, we made it," were my first words as I awoke a couple of days later in the hospital. "Who's Charlie?" the doctor asked as he checked my vitals. "The kid I came through the portal with. Where is he? Where's Charlie?" The doctor laughed. "Your name is Peter Matthews, correct?" I nodded my head, pain radiating down my spine. I asked him again about Charlie, mumbling something about the portal, and asked if the rain had come yet. I was high on pain medication, so the doctor initially shrugged off my weird questions. Charlie never came with me through the portal. I remembered his screams of agony, letting go of his hand, and it dawned on me that he had stayed behind, left to suffer in the rain. They had found me alone. A witness said that I had simply appeared in the middle of the field. According to my injuries, they believed that I had fallen quite a distance, but from where, they couldn't tell. At the moment of writing this, I'm still cooped up at the hospital. I've tried searching for John and Charlie online, but without their last names, it's a futile task. Not to mention that Greenville is an extremely generic town's name. I owe them both my life, and in return, I ended up losing them. So I'm writing this in their honor. They gave me a second chance at life, returned me to my own life. Though if the storm truly begins in 2020, we might not have much time left. John, if you read this, believe me when I say this is going to happen, and get out of Greenville. Save your family while there's still time. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. With prices going up on just about everything lately, dealing with money can be stressful. Trying to manage subscriptions, track spending, and cut costs can feel overwhelming. Luckily, Rocket Money can relieve some of that stress and help you feel confident in the financial decisions that you make. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. And get alerts if your bills increase in price and if there is unusual activity in your accounts, if you're close to going over budget, and even when you're doing a good job. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. The app automatically scans your bills to find opportunities to save and then goes to work to get you better deals. They'll even talk to customer service so you don't have to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. And go to rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps today. That's rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. I think they're watching us. I think they're judging us. I think you could type away on that cell phone all night, kid, and it won't make one lick of a difference by morning. There's nobody that can help us. Nobody that can save us. This is God's doing. You should know that, a good Catholic kid like you. God gets his due. God always gets his due. Jake from the seafood department. My friend Marcus tried to leave the store today. A 10-foot-tall bear trotted out of the woods and ate him alive. He left behind a wife and a family of 5. I don't know if anybody will be able to read this story. I don't know if anybody's listening anymore, because I don't know if there's anybody still alive outside of this store. I pray that's not the case. There are a few pessimists here that seem to insist otherwise, but I pray that they're wrong. I don't even know where to begin. Emily in Seasonal told me to start from the top. I know she was being sarcastic at the time, but still, I think her advice helped. So here we go. From the top. Saturday, January 12th, 2019, 10:30. Nobody knows how to rock an impending blizzard quite like the good people of the New Jersey shore. Panic pumps its way into our small beach towns quicker than taurine in a teenager. The chain reaction of anxiety is truly a spectacle in and of itself. Armchair weathermen pop up in your Facebook feed. Locals spread gossip at their favorite hotspots. Predictions of 1 inch of precipitation quickly morph into promises of 2 and 3 feet plus. The gas station runs out of gas. The coffee stores run out of coffee. The convenience stores run out of cigarettes. You get the idea, it's chaos. And there is no better place for that anxiety to manifest than the grocery store. Hundreds of people piled into the town Costco that morning, and I unfortunately counted myself as one of them. The storm was due to arrive within the hour, but, well, I never prepared for these things. My apartment still needed food and water and most of the essentials. After days of lazy debate and flicking back and forth between the Weather Channel and Netflix, I finally settled on the fact that the delivery guy might not be able to make it to my house that night. The first flakes of snow drifted through the sky as I pulled into the Costco parking lot. A line of grouchy locals were formed outside the large metal pull-down doors. Everybody acted unpleasant. Some folks rushed their empty shopping carts to the door to get there first. Others cut off cars in the lot, honked, and gave them the finger. True Jersey spirit. But you couldn't blame them. The arrival of the white stuff only increased the urge to get home before the storm. I flashed my membership ID card at the gate, and after a 5-minute wait, I turned the corner into the store. A massive warehouse of empty shelves opened up before my eyes. It was beautifully uncoordinated chaos. Store employees waited by the doors and shouted to the bickering customers, "Welcome to Costco. Make it quick, folks. We're closing in half an hour." Lines began at the registers and dipped back towards the back of the warehouse. Sample booths were out of samples. The food court was out of food. The clothing department didn't even have jackets. Families chattered to each other nervously and skittered through the remaining goods like ants over a rotting carcass. At that moment, I finally began to grasp the seriousness of this storm. I caught a plain-dressed guy sifting through expiration dates in the bread aisle. He seemed normal enough, so when we crossed paths by the quesadilla wraps, I asked how much snow that we were expected to get. He stared at me incredulously. "Didn't you catch the news this morning? They've been watching this thing all night. We only came here because my son is diabetic." He paused, caught his breath, and examined my blank reaction. I said nothing. "Seriously, they're saying it's gonna be biblical, man. Worse than they've ever seen around here. Something about a convergence of 3 cold fronts. The perfect storm, you know what they say. It's going to be bad." A woman called out from over by the cherries, "Marcus, we gotta go. Somebody said that there's already 3 inches on the ground." People around us started to get a little nervous. A couple muttered, "Is that true? 3 inches, I heard half a foot." I cut them off. "Look, I just walked in the store, it can't be that bad. Nothing but flurries right now." As if to contradict me directly, a meek male voice cackled over the loudspeaker. Folks, it seems this storm is approaching quicker than we thought. There is approximately a half foot of snow on the ground at the moment, and the temperature has dropped to 14 degrees in the last hour. It's time for everybody to start making their way home." And all fragments of suburban nicety and decorum evaporated in seconds. A stampede began somewhere near the registers. People pushed their carts to the exits without even paying. The workers tried to hold them off, but dozens of families slipped through the cracks and sprinted out into white wilderness behind them. Their voices called out to each other like the panicked victims of a horrible catastrophe. Children cried. Mothers screamed for their husbands to get the car. All of them did this without any proper understanding of what was actually going on. They just panicked. I still couldn't see much outside. There were just so many people. I laughed at the whirlwind of nervous bodies gathered around me. Unbelievable. I was out there only 5 minutes ago. I shouted the sentiment to Marcus and his family, but the stampede was upon us too soon. He grabbed one of his children and moved his family towards the back. "Get the girls," he shouted to his wife. "Let these animals leave." And so we did. People poured through the store and out the doors in droves. They knocked over plastic envelopes and cardboard boxes on the way, but nobody cared, they just ran. Finally, after about 15 minutes of struggle, hundreds of people exited the store into the white wilderness. At that point, I could finally see behind them. There was a foot of snow on the ground. 11 o'clock. I quickly made my way through the aisles to grab a couple of essentials. I rushed my cart up to the counter as the last few employees attempted to mop up the mess of the stampede. I asked who I could pay for my stuff, but a friendly-looking girl with a ponytail and snow-covered jacket quickly shook her head. "Just go. Go, and if you can't get out, we'll still be here." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Seriously," she mumbled. "Go look outside." I nodded and rerouted toward the exit. I looked for a security guard who might stop me and ask for a receipt, but there was nobody there. The entrance that appeared to be pushing capacity limits only a half hour ago was empty, and the gate was closed. Hello? Hey, I need to get out of here." I pushed my cart to the end of a long hallway and finally found a door propped open towards the end. Wind blew it so aggressively that I thought it might fall off the hinges. I sprinted through the exit, but my car got caught on something outside. I flipped over the cart in the dramatic tumble that left me face first in the snow. That hurt. A chorus of voices called out through the storm from somewhere in the parking lot. "Get in the car! Get in the car!" somebody screamed. "What the heck is that?" said somebody else. "Get in the car!" shouted the first voice. A flash of boxed yellow opened up in between the unyielding sheets of drifting white. An older man ran towards the passenger door of the enveloped Ford and launched himself inside. "Go, go, go, it's coming!" I got up and scanned my surroundings while trying to cover my eyes. My feet sunk into the snow that went well past my ankles and halfway up my legs. The Ford skidded through the parking lot at a high speed. Their panic made my heart skip a beat, and I couldn't help but wonder why. It was only snow. I got my answer a moment later. The family car drifted its way past a row of trees on its way out of the parking lot. They skittered and nearly flipped a few times, and yet it looked like they might make it. But just as they had stopped to yield and turn right, something leaped from the tops of the trees and onto their car. It looked a lot like a lion. The teeth were the only thing that distinguished its appearance, even with the bad visibility I could see. The beast's incisors stretched well past its chin. The animal slapped a massive paw against the windshield. Nothing happened, and so it slapped at it a few more times. When it broke, I could hear the family scream again. It was all over in a matter of minutes. The animal took the mother first. The woman screamed for her husband to help her, but a massive claw cut through her neck and the next sentence began indecipherable. The father launched himself through the glass to try and fight it back, but he soon met a similar fate. The creature took the children next. I tried not to watch their tiny little snow coats covered in blood. I tried to think about saving them, but they were hundreds of feet away now. The snow stacked up to 2 feet at least, and by the time that I would have gotten there, they would have already been gone. And so I closed the door like a coward. Their screams drifted over the sounds of the storm, but I locked both the handle and the deadlock. I pushed a row of carts in front of the door, and then I walked back into the store. January 12th, 11:35 a.m. We heard screaming. I heard screaming. Was there an accident? Is everybody okay? My husband went out there. Did you see him? Well, don't just stand there. We all heard a crash. People's lives are on the line. Say something. The word vomit combination of questions, comments, and accusations came in like an avalanche the moment that I rounded the door into the store. 16 different people stared from various corners of the massive warehouse, and they looked like the war-torn survivors of some modern, materialistic apocalypse. One of them held a box of packaged peanuts like a weapon. Another was still trying to mop up the collapsed 24-pack of Mountain Dew spraying down the main aisle. None of them looked at all prepared for what I had to say next. I could not possibly answer them all at once. I couldn't even explain it to them if I tried. So, wordlessly, I gestured over my shoulder for the mob to follow as I turned around and headed back towards the door. I pointed to the endless white backdrop behind the massive metal door. Don't go out there. Somebody laughed from the back. A few people muttered to each other. An aggressive woman whom I later learned to be Marion pushed by me and tried to unlock the metal gate. No, you don't know what's out there. I'm not explaining it properly, please. She looked at me with wide eagle eyes. Marion had a voice like a whip. She looked like the type to use her words like a weapon and make absolutely no apologies for it. She snapped her response back at me like I was another hapless victim of her assured Fortune 500. What? What is out there? Some snow and my husband who could be hurt. Get out of my way, idiot. Every minute matters in an accident. Ma'am, please believe me, you don't understand. You cannot go outside right now. Wait for the authorities. Get out of my way. I did everything I could to block the exit while the rest of the crowd looked on in stunned silence. Some of them believed me. Some of them told her to stop, but none of them knew to block the other door. I glanced at it for only a moment, but Marion followed my gaze. She must have noticed the row of grocery carts awkwardly blocking the only window of white light in the dark warehouse. I tried to stop her, I tried to catch her. The rest of the group did nothing but yell. Some said to let her go, and some said to hold her. In the end, Marion moved the carts and she went outside. A group of people crowded, following her to the door, and waited outside the small glass pane. One woman, a friend named Liz, tried to join Marion outside, but a few men blocked her way. I recognized one of them as Marcus, and I thanked God momentarily that one sane person was still alive. No, block her. We barely got this door closed the first time. God, she can't even walk out there. What do you reckon? 3 feet, maybe 4. Can't even see anything. She's out of my line of sight. Marion, are you okay? The group fought at the door for a little while. For a disturbing moment, it looked like Liz might win out, but I couldn't allow that to happen again. The friendly woman from the cash register, Tiffany, stood by my side and watched it all unfold. Sensing that I could no longer control the situation, I whispered to her, "They don't know what's out there. No one can go out there." Tiffany judged me with a pair of trusting blue eyes. I tried to appear honest. I tried to appear normal. She didn't know me. She could have assumed that I was crazy. Most sane people would. Even still, at that moment, Tiffany put on her best outside voice and screamed at the top of her lungs. The massive tone did not support her tiny frame, and she shook when she did it, but her endeavor probably saved a few lives. "Everyone, enough! Listen." The entire group quieted down. The struggle at the door ceased. Marcus wordlessly pushed the lock back into place. Liz lifted her massive hands off his coat and backed off. Tiffany pointed without another word. Everyone in the entire store turned their attention to me. I caught my breath. "Everyone, stop. Please listen, just listen." As if in perfect response, an odd trilling sound escalated in volume outside. It was quiet at first, barely audible above the wind. It sounded like a bird, maybe, or several birds, calling out to mate in spring. I know that sounds absurd in this setting. It certainly felt that way. Soon the trilling grew more excited and anxious. Its volume grew to an almost unignorable tone. I tried to shout out to the survivors, but nobody could hear me. And then something started to scratch. The grating of bone against metal screeched like fingernails against a blackboard. People screamed and cried as they doubled over in pain and held their ears. Liz and Marcus collided into each other and fell to the ground. One simple sound turned the whole room to chaos. And then out of nowhere, a small hole popped in through the metal gate. For a moment, I was able to see the claws outside, but only for a moment. "Get away from the door. Everybody get away from the door." The 15 remaining survivors suddenly stampeded in my direction. Turns out, they did not need much more motivation than that. Nobody should. I turned on my heel and led the group back towards the registers as the chattering grew to an unbearable level. Screams sprinkled into the background. A large object careened against the metal gate and shook it violently as we sprinted past. People shouted to each other over the din as they ran for the safety of the store. "Get inside. They can't get in. God, I hope they can't get in. What was that? Get inside. Hide, hide." A horrible ripping sound echoed in through the hole in the door, like the sensation of flesh being torn away from skin. Something was feeding. I was sure of it. Tiffany fell down by the bread aisle and nearly passed out. Marcus and an older gentleman named Kyle dropped to their knees to help her. I passed by them and tried to get the remaining folks to slow down. "Block the aisle," I shouted. "Quickly, block the aisle." Jake from Seafood quickly fell in line to help. We grabbed some bicycles and ramen boxes to block off the entrance to our aisle. It was all that we had close by. Nobody had seen the animals get inside, but still, I think it made us feel safer to be enclosed. In the end, 15 remaining survivors sat in the barricaded bread aisle, dumbfounded and defeated. The chirping died down after a little while, and then the questions began. 12 p.m. Do you think Marion died out there? Maybe she made it to the car. I saw something big in the window, definitely something big. Yeah, I saw something too. What was that sound then? A snowdrift. Something stuck against the wall. Yeah, John, a snowdrift lifted itself up and slammed itself against the back door. It must have made those bird noises while it was at it. A bird, you think? What kind of bird on a Jersey shore? What did you see? Yes, you wide eyes, what the heck did you see out there? They all looked at me again. The messenger. They looked like birds themselves, hungrily seeking out answers that they so desperately did not want to believe to be true. Their beady eyes focused on me like a fresh piece of meat to place their blame. I had to play along. I had to keep them away from the worst of the terror for as long as possible. I owed them that one final gift of ignorance. Or so I thought. I don't know what's out there. I still don't believe it myself. But it has killed 2 people already. So there's only one thing that we can do. Board the doors, board every single entrance, and block it with some boxes or shopping carts or whatever we can find. Make weapons, find defensive positions. Nobody goes outside. I saw something swimming next to me in the water. I don't care if you believe me. I saw its eyes. Tiffany from Front End. 3:30. The snow fell for hours. We couldn't see the storm anymore. The entrances and exits to Costco were blocked for safety reasons, but we could certainly hear it. The wind and weight of the white stuff sent creaks and groans throughout the metal beam in the warehouse. Each unhappy grunt from the building's support sent a nervous rattle through our merry band of 15 remaining survivors. Costco had been good to us, but if the heat cut out or the ceiling came down, we would soon be on our own. A woman named Ellen held a bawling child and a judgmental gaze towards anybody who dared eye contact. After hours of silence, she broke the silence in the void with a voice that sounded 2 seconds close to giving in altogether. Has anybody contacted the authorities? A few people grumbled their responses. The store manager, Kevin, spoke up the loudest. We tried an hour ago. No dice. Radios are down, phones are down. I think we all know why. We can't even see outside anymore. We're lucky to have power still. Ellen considered this for a moment. Okay, I think we're all in agreement that we should not try to go outside. Ellen moved to hush her sniffling toddler. But we need to try and contact someone. A woman is dead, and if what that boy says about the accident is true. It is true, I interjected angrily. Then we should exhaust all our possibilities to let somebody know what happened here. An elderly gentleman stood up from the floor and spoke in a confidently quaking tone. We should try the roof. Kevin moved to interject him while a few others shouted their agreement. Mitchell, come on, nobody's going outside. It's too dangerous. He coughed a laugh. Boy, that roof is 100 feet off the ground. Nobody would climb up there for no reason. Plus, it's probably snow-covered. Why go up there at all? Liz asked. We're safe here. Could see if the police are on the roads, Ellen offered. Could see if the neighborhood behind us still has power. We'll get a better view of things up there. I also don't like the way that ceiling is creaking, Kevin mused. If we could shovel some snow off, it would lessen the chance of it caving. It's going to be dark soon, Tiffany murmured. The group grew quiet. We all knew what that meant. I stood up. I better do it now. I'll go. Anybody coming with me? Not a soul volunteered. The dripping of water against the hull of our store reflected an embarrassing and awkward silence. I can't help but think of it as shameful in retrospect. Naturally, Marcus's family protested when he stood up. "Daddy, no, please." But the bright, kind man of only 35 said nothing. He just dusted off his jeans and followed me on down the back hallway. I admired him for that. And I still do, even after everything. 3:45. We had to walk for a while before we found the staircase to the roof. Mitchell led the way while Kevin and the rest stayed behind in the safety of our aisle fort. We took a few wrong turns here and there. At one point, poor old Mitch was sure that he had found it, but it ended up being the bathroom. After an endless search, finally we landed 6 feet in front of the freezing cold exit to the roof. Mitchell snapped his fingers and turned to us like two new rookie employees. "We keep a heater by the outside door. It's a fire safety thing or something. Kevin got dinged for it years ago with the town inspector. Been paranoid about it ever since. Anyway, I thought that heat should lessen the snow and ice enough to let you guys out." Marcus nodded, approached the door, and pushed with all of his might. "It's a pull, son." He coughed and stepped back. "Good luck out there. I mean it." I laughed and pulled open the door. A river of cold water entered the building. "Crap, it must be melting," I shouted while climbing over the ice blocks that led outside. "That heater still works." Marcus soon joined me. In an instant, we were over the frost covering the door entrance and into the freedom of open space on the roof. The dipping sun looked beautiful against a pristine blanket of white. I tried to run forward, but my feet sank in the still deep snow. I tripped and fell on my face, just like Marianne. "We should be able to flag anybody down from here," Marcus shouted. "We can even get some of this stuff off the roof." He brandished a shovel over his head like a victory torch. I laughed. "We're not out of the woods yet. Can't even see our cars still." I pointed to the parking lot and the location of the accident. "Those people crashed over there." I pointed again to where the highway should be. And look, nobody on the roads, just like I thought. Marcus nodded as an audible thud erupted behind our backs. "No way!" My new friend turned and sprinted towards the door. "Mitchell, you!" Marcus screamed. "I knew that dude was shady. Mitchell, open the door, open the door!" Nobody answered. "Mitchell, what the heck, dude? There's 4 feet of snow out here, let us in." Nobody answered. "Is he really gonna?" I started. Marcus finished. "Yeah, he's gonna. That dude didn't like me from the beginning. I saw him looking at me and muttering under his breath. I saw him look at my wife. Probably locked the door and ran off to go creep." He tried to catch his breath. And then Marcus did something that he would never live to regret. He went to toss the shovel off the roof. Call it a release of pent-up frustration, or a childish tantrum, or just a righteously pissed-off guy frustrated with his newfound lack of options. Regardless, he caught himself before he did it. He had the maturity to realize that it was stupid. But when he went to throw, Marcus slipped on the slick ice and lost his footing. The snow on the ground was still stacked up so high that it covered the safety railings. He went over the edge quicker than you would think. I ran over and I screamed. I expected to find my friend dead when I looked over the ledge. Instead, I saw that idiot sitting on his butt looking back up at me. 100 feet, yeah right. I laughed. It was so stupid and soul crushing. You just had to laugh at it. "How are we gonna get you back up?" I shouted back down. "Can you make it to the entrance?" "I can try, but they're not gonna let me in," he replied. "We'll make them." I tried to find a safer way to jump down and meet him. I knew the risks in that decision. I knew what was out there. But there was no way I was going to let my only friend become just another victim. No way that I was going to watch another person die. Marcus called back up to me. "Hey, do you hear that? In the woods." I did hear it. Trees and branches gave somewhere in the forest to our right. I could see over them from my position, but I didn't want to believe what I saw. I didn't have the courage to even shout a warning to Marcus. I knew he didn't stand a chance. But when he looked up at me and called out, I think he understood. So did the bear. It never really slowed down after breaking through the tree line. Marcus tried to run away. Natural instinct says to run when a large animal approaches. Some people even say to run when faced with a brown bear. They usually only want to defend their territory. But this was no ordinary brown bear. On its hind legs, the creature stood at least 5 to 6 feet tall. I could tell because it looked taller than Marcus even from a distance. Both my friend and the bear struggled through the tall snow. For a sickeningly sweet moment, it looked like he might get away. But just as Marcus had reached the snow-covered front door, he fell to his feet. The rest is history. I watched as the bear ripped limbs and pounds of flesh from Marcus's still shaking frame. He screamed for a while. He begged for his wife or his babies, and then his mom, and then his dad. All of the pride and courage that encapsulated his entire presence had disappeared before my eyes. I watched it all while my addled mind tried to wrap itself around another poor person dying. "There's nothing I can do," I muttered. "The bear will kill me too." He couldn't hear me, of course, because his ears were being digested in the belly of the beast. I was the coward. I knew it then, and I know it now. 6:30. It was dark, so dark that it became difficult for my eyes to stay fixed to the rotting corpse of my friend, but there was nothing else to watch. The bear left and came back to pick at his remains. I could hear other animals approaching through the trees. Scavengers likely, with demonic attributes all to their own. The bear roared them off in a sound so deafening that it must have made the walls of Costco shake. And then it returned to casually ingesting the leg muscles of a good man. It was cold. So cold that the hopes of melting snow quickly evaporated into the set sun. An ominous awareness of death encompassed the parking lot and the lonely rooftop around me. The streetlights still stayed on amazingly, and that part I could not figure out. Either Costco kept up an impeccable maintenance schedule or the power lines must be winter-proofed exponentially. The door was still locked. I tried it 1,000 times before the cold covered my hand so quickly that it actually hurt for my fingers to fight with the metal. And so I sat, frostbitten, freezing, and welcoming a quiet death that looked so much more peaceful than the horror that took place a few stories down below. I could feel my heart slow down. I could feel saliva freezing at my chin. I could smell nothing now, not for hours. It would not be much longer now. First, my extremities would go, and then my heart. The cold would encompass me and freeze my body in the lifelong beauty of a scared kid of 25 who didn't want to die. And I was alright with that. At least alright with the logic of it. It was certainly better than the thought of that animal eating me alive. But just as the hollows of my mind started to turn out the last few lights, and moments before the last few fiery neurons said goodnight, a white window of hope appeared somewhere to my right. Footsteps crunched steadily over snow stacked several feet high. A stranger appeared in front of my eyes. I do not know how or why. I suppose frostbite can do that to a guy. He looked no older than 45. He wore a short-sleeve office shirt, clean jeans with perfectly parted blonde hair and a blue tie. He spoke with a deep-seated boredom for the perils surrounding us in the night. "Good evening. Get up. We don't have time." "There is no God. There is no devil. Not here. There's me, and then there's him. Pontius." 6:35 p.m. I couldn't move. The cold covered me in its entirety. My feet sat encapsulated in frozen blocks of ice and sheets of fresh snow. My eyes struggled to stay open as the lashes froze together in uncomfortable closeness. My hand slumped at the end of my arm like meaningless lumps while I debated my ability to use them at all. But still, my brain screamed in defiance. I needed to get up. I knew I needed to get up. because everything about the stranger in front of me appeared to be fake. I can't explain it any other way. It was an instinctual reaction beyond the obvious reasons. Every fiber in my being felt like he didn't belong, on a roof of a Costco in the middle of a biblical storm, or even on this planet for that matter. I felt ill in his presence. I wanted to hate him, I wanted to punch him, I wanted to vomit on him. I felt like one of those cows in a pen that can sense the other cow's sick. I wanted to get away from him more than anything in the world, but I just couldn't do it. The man stared casually at the carnage 50 feet below. His beady little eyes darted excitedly towards between the bare blood and various pieces of tissue and limbs discarded along the way. That body used to be Marcus, my mind reflected lazily. That bloody corpse has a family inside. When he spoke, the stranger chose his words carefully and used them patiently. There was no rush to his tone, like the way a teacher gives instructions to a student. You know, bears can climb, boy, even the big ones. I tried to laugh. The sound that came through sounded somewhere between a snort and a gasp as a fresh breeze of cold air stung my cheeks. The air felt colder as time moved on. I did not expect that to be the case. Do you understand me? If the animal is hungry enough or angry enough, it'll climb. You're not safe here. Can you confirm that you understand? The stranger approached me and pulled a flashlight from his pocket. Idiot, I know that. We're locked out. I spit out through frostbitten lips. Are the police coming? He smiled. The police in this town are dead. He replied quickly, simply, and without hesitation. I believe everybody inside this town is dead, save for you and your friends, -1. I'm all that's left. The bear grunted and roared happily from down below our position. Could it see us? I knew nothing about bears, especially creatures this large, to suggest otherwise. What's your name? Pontius. What is it? Pontius. What, like Pontius Pilate? Precisely. A Roman name, a good name. Why? He smiled again, and I hated that smile. It made my stomach turn. Why what? Why Pontius? He considered that for a moment. Pontius brought order. I am order. My back shifted uncomfortably against the slanted roof paneling. The feeling in my fingers began to drift away. My toes felt like they could be flicked off like tiny little detachable fruits. Time slipped away in quickening seconds while this guy wasted it talking about angels and demons. I wanted to run. I wanted to get up and jump off into the bear pit if it got me away from him, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. Well, Pontius, could you bring some order to the locked door? He smiled. I can. How? Pontius walked past me. He pulled a crowbar of some sort from a knapsack on his back, and then with one swift motion, he brought it against the small glass pane. The glass shattered easily in return. I offered a hoarse cheer as he quickly returned to lift me up by the arms and into the entrance to the store. The warmth of fresh heat immediately washed over me. I could cry, it felt so good. How are you not cold? I asked, but my question was ignored. Pontius rushed over and shut the door just as warm water began to pelt my back. Hey man, who turned off the showers? I need that. Pontius snorted. The sound seemed just as foreign to him as it did to me 5 minutes before. The rain has come. It's not safe to go outside any longer. 8:30. I haven't moved. Why haven't I moved? The objects around me came into focus as my tired eyes opened and adjusted to their warm colors. A small room, a heater in the corner, electricity humming warmly behind my back, a light bulb drifting in and out of luminescence, and a hole poked through the space where the roof door window used to be. Water in the corner, water everywhere. A rush of liquid drifted in via a small crack in the bottom of the door frame and through the hole that Pontius punched earlier. My still cold toes greeted the return of feeling as a river of warm water passed over them. My ears opened up to an endless dripping, leaking and sapping that filled the building. Reality soon weighed in. I got up and stared through what used to be the window. A fork of lightning snatched its way across the sky, and seconds later, rolling thunder dipped in and out of volume menacingly. I couldn't see the snow anymore, at least not all of it. An ocean of water covered the roof. Torrents fell from up above in unending sideways sheets. Gallons rushed effortlessly over the edge to mercilessly smack the pavement 50 feet below. The bear roared somewhere in the edges of the night. The storm had changed. I couldn't have slept that long. Instincts took over. I knew my small room next to the roof could soon become a vacuum for the water, so I turned to my heel and I sprinted. I found the hallway that led me there. I found the turn to the familiar employee break room that we had passed before, and then I opened a door and suddenly I was standing over the store again. An ocean of consumer goods sat before me. Soda cans and boxes of toilet paper drifted easily through the waves. The river had a current to it. Bikes and larger objects like couches were no match for the tide. They drifted with the other junk lazily through the aisles. I tried to measure the water below me in my mind. 3 feet, maybe 4. There must be a leak down there. Suddenly, I remembered the hole in that metal pull-down door. Quietly, I began to accept the fact that my friends could have drowned. "Matt," a voice screamed to my right. "Get in here." A foreign shape pulled me by my collar and dragged me. I couldn't see anything anymore. Water poured in from over and behind me so feverishly that it became hard to stand or see it all. But the hint of a Jersey accent gave way to my trust. She sounded like home. We entered a room, a door slammed. I pushed the matted hair out of my eyes to find 14 survivors, wet, scared, and shaking to their bones. "Where's Marcus? Daddy!" Tiffany grabbed me by the shoulders. "Listen to me, I don't care if you believe me, but I saw something in the water. Outside before we had to climb. It was swimming beside me and I saw its eyes." She sighed. "We're not alone in this building. Not anymore. Something came inside." All you need to do is walk into the light. Pontius. Picture yourself in a room no larger than the average kitchen. There are some lockers to the left. Plain white cabinets are catty-cornered to the right. A shelf holds a container of coffee K-cups. A blackboard lists a vacation schedule, and employee street clothes decorate the wet floor like some lost remnants of high school. The ceiling is a drop. It's the type that hides all kinds of secrets just a few inches above the plaster. It's leaking now. Water covers the floor at about 4 inches deep, and that number is climbing fast. A bulb flickers over your head. It's the only remaining source of light in the night. Now jam that room with more than a dozen sweating strangers and pump them full of the anxiety of an impending unnatural disaster. 9 o'clock. I had to say something to them. The remaining survivors in the room stared at me like bloodthirsty hyenas. The questions they shouted sounded a lot like that too. I had been there before, only hours before. It was so easy to forget. It felt like a millennia. "What happened to Marcus?" A familiar voice shouted from by the lockers. "What happened to Mitchell?" Somebody else called back. I couldn't move my mouth to make the words his poor widow needed to hear. Instead, I just shook my head. Marcus's wife screamed so loud that I thought the glass might break. It was enough to make the other people in the cramped room shudder and shift uncomfortably. Some actually tried to move away from her, like me with the mad cow, but there was just nowhere to go. That horrible, heart-shattering, gobsmacking scream reached down into my insides. I quickly tried to explain myself in a heap of word vomit and broken sentences, as water pounded the quickly growing puddles around us. Mitchell, he locked the door, he locked us out. I sputtered as fast as possible. Marcus, he fell over the edge. The room fell silent save for the poor woman's tears. I tried to make her pain swift, like taking off a band-aid, I told myself, right? He's dead. I'm sorry. A second chilling scream filled the room. Marcus's children wrapped their arms around their sobbing mother's legs and buried their heads in the folds of her dress. 13 disappointed faces stared back at me. I stared back defiant, trying to defend myself against any further inquiries, and then I started to break down. Tiffany appeared at my side again. She was drenched from head to toe with a tie somehow managing to hold her long hair out of her eyes. She looked beautiful then. Where do we go? She asked. I shook my head again. I don't know. 9:45. The children had managed to fall asleep. A few of us propped up an old table and laid them on it side by side. We wrapped our remaining dry jackets around them. The kids took to snoring soon after. They looked like 5 little pigs in a blanket by the end. I made the joke aloud, but nobody laughed. There was more than a foot of water in the room now. It wasn't safe for anybody to lie down on the floor, but Kevin did it anyway and we didn't stop him. The rest of the adults also tried to close their eyes in whatever way they could. A majority of them huddled in the corner together for warmth and leverage. Tiffany and I agreed to take the first watch. With the way the water was rising, none of us expected that to last long. We would need to have a plan. But everybody had been running around Costco for hours fighting for their lives. They needed some rest. When it seemed quiet enough that most folks weren't listening, Tiffany sidled up beside me. What did you see? She whispered. I hesitated. You tell me and I'll tell you. Jake, Ellen, and Liz soon caught wind of our conversation and quietly shuffled over. The rest of the group stayed quiet. Nobody wanted to wake up the widow. The snow turned to rain a couple of hours ago, Tiffany murmured. Kevin suggested that we get to higher ground anyway. Plus, we wanted to find you guys. 2 minutes later, the store got hit by a tsunami. It's gotta be a few feet deep down there now. I had to swim out. We got to the stairs just in time. All 13 of us survived thanks to Kevin. Liz and Ellen nodded enthusiastically while eyeing the exhausted, middle-aged man lying just above the water. We think he's okay, Jake offered. Just needs some sleep. We started on the morning shift together. I nodded, but something about the story didn't fit. You said 13. Jake hesitated this time. Yeah, we counted once we got in here just to be sure. Why? We had 16 before Marion went outside, including me. Then you lost her, me, Mitchell, and Marcus. 12. You should have had 12. They all stared ahead stupidly. Do you see what I'm saying? I whispered in a panic. Where did you get another person? We all turned our attention to the pile of human bodies huddled together in the corner. A few of them breathed steadily under the cover of garbage bags, spare clothes, and paper bags. Somebody snored by the lockers. The children stirred on the table beside them, but underneath it all, a small sound stuck out. Chewing. The next few things happened quite suddenly. Kevin slipped under the water. Jeff rushed over to help him. Marcus, his widow, was the first one sleeping to open her eyes. She looked shocked at first, like a proper lady who just sat on a piece of gum. When she screamed again, I think most people just thought that she was still upset about her husband. Nobody reacted in time. Nobody noticed the red tint to the river forming around Kevin. Nobody noticed these slight disturbances in the water. Nobody noticed one of the children missing from the table. But I did. Just before it happened, the pieces of our situation started to slide into formation. I could feel the presence in the room with us. I could smell its rot. I could hear the horrible gnashing and biting growing louder, and I could almost hear the tearing of flesh. And when an avalanche of fresh water poured in through the air vents, I could see the creatures coming inside. I wanted to save Kevin. I wanted to save everyone. I wanted to save myself too. But I didn't have time. Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which perceived him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so, Amen. January 12th at 10 o'clock. Cue the hysteria. Thick ribbons of dark red blood melded in with floodwater. A dozen or more survivors struggled to stay afloat inside the cramped locker room. Some of them tried to swim away from the carnage, away from the creatures, but they didn't get far. Kevin never made it back to the surface. The children never even had a chance to scream. The widow fought with 3-foot-long leeches attached to her vocal cords, and I had to act. I had to. I remembered that the pockmarked scaffolding outside our room provided some relief from the flood. If I opened the door, I thought maybe we could evacuate the existing water in our room. "We need to open the door," I shouted breathlessly over my shoulder to anybody who would listen. "Somebody help me." But only Tiffany and Jake could follow. The three of us struggled with the jammed handle for a moment. The water made it almost impossible to open. Just as something slimy brushed against my leg, we pushed it free, and my plan worked in a beautifully chaotic fashion. An avalanche of briny water, broken bodies, and enormous leeches flew out into the open scaffolding. I wrapped my hand onto the railing. I just had to hold on. My fellow survivors did not die quietly, though. Most of them slipped over the edge screaming. Some of them bumped me in the side on their way down. I know, for instance, that Ellen was still alive before the fall. Her panicked brown eyes reached out to me hopefully just before she lost her grip. I tried to reach my hand out to help, but I had to survive. I had to survive. She dropped unceremoniously into the ocean of boxes below the scaffolding and landed with a sickening splash at the intersection of aisle 6. There was no movement and she didn't resurface, but another thick ribbon of blood confirmed my suspicion. I did not see the children go, and I thank God for that, and that alone because Jake did. Jake swore that he still heard the children crying well into the night. January 13th, 1:45 a.m. 3 survivors sat on the scaffolding above Costco. We looked and felt like a trio of waterlogged rats. We were the hopeless remnants of a catastrophe. The building appeared to be quiet. There were still the usual sounds. Rainwater dripped in through the roof. The walls creaked uneasily. The power struggled for a little while longer, but the lights gave way sometime around midnight. It was dark then, and then we could hear everything, even the things we didn't want to hear. "What now?" Tiffany asked in between frightened sobs. "What are we supposed to do now?" I shrugged despondently and pulled my cell phone from my pocket. The slick black screen seemed foreign, like a remnant of some age where things still made sense. I clicked the home button. Amazingly, it worked. "I'm going to write this down," I started. "You know what I think?" Jake interrupted. "I think they're watching us. I think they're judging us. I think you could type away on that cell phone all night, kid, and it won't make one lick of difference by morning. This is God's doing." He spit lazily into the ocean below us, and then he tilted his head in the direction of the cross on my neck. I didn't even realize that I still had it. "You should know that. A good Catholic kid like you. And God gets his due. God always gets his due." It was the first thing that I typed. "What do you mean by they?" Tiffany asked. She was crying now openly. Her sobs filled the void. "Why would God want to hurt us? Why would anybody want to hurt us? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't want to die in there. I don't want to die tonight. I'm a good person. I'm a good person." Convulsions overtook her tiny little body as she shook in place. I wrapped my arms around her shoulders and pulled her close. Her cries started to die down. "Honestly, man, the way that we treat this planet, we toss our waste in the rivers and our rivers in the crappers, and then we wonder why islands are drowning. It's past time God hits the reset button. Jake laughed at his own stupid joke. It's past time, but he still needs us, right? There's no game without player 1 and player 2, right? You can't continue. He slammed the scaffolding in anger. Hey, stop it, man, she's had enough. I snapped angrily. Just walk into the light. Tiffany whispered low, so low only that I could hear it. Just walk into the light. I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to ask what she knew about the light, but the scaffolding started to shake again. The three of us sat up violently and gripped the railing. Somebody was walking. Oh no. I muttered as footsteps started to reverberate somewhere on the other end. Please God, no. We couldn't see a thing. The entire warehouse remained without light. The scaffolding continued to shake for a few moments. Jake got to his feet and stood in front of us protectively. The footsteps stopped. They paused a few yards into the black abyss ahead. Who's there? Jake asked. Mitchell, if that's you, you're not welcome here, man. You know what you did. You're an animal. Stay away from us. Nobody replied. Hey, Mitchell, I'm serious. We're armed. Jake turned back to me and shrugged. I started to say something back, but just as suddenly as they arrived, the footsteps turned into a sprint. The scaffolding shook so severely that I had to hold Tiffany just to keep her from falling over the edge. Everything happened so quickly. In seconds, these steps reached Jake. I wanted to get up to help him, but doing so would have assuredly sent Tiffany into the water. I could not see the shape in front of him. I couldn't see anything of the struggle that ensued. But I could see the axe slip into his head. Jake turned around to face us, and I'll never forget the dumbfounded expression on his face. Several inches of sharpened metal stuck out from a gaping wound right in his forehead, but the poor guy still managed to make his facial features appear surprised. I mumbled something to him. I think I told him it would be okay. I didn't know what to say. A moment later, the shape behind Jake pushed his body and it slipped on the wet floor. He flipped over the 4-foot-high railings and fell to his death in the warehouse below. Mitchell appeared in front of our eyes, and he laughed. In spite of everything, in spite of the outright murder of my friends, in spite of the horrible depravity of the things he did, in spite of this absurd storm that he could have caused, that sick man laughed. Anger bubbled inside of me like a virus. It was something about the tone of that laugh. The absolute lack of empathy set me on fire. Tiffany whispered something in my ear, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. I could see the scaffolding start to slip and dip dangerously, but it didn't register quite right. The only emotion that consumed me in that moment seemed to be my fury. I launched myself at Mitchell like a lion. In seconds, my hands were around his stubble-stained neck and my knees were up against his chest. I slammed his head into the pockmarked floor over and over again. Blood seeped out of his mouth like a leaky faucet, but the man just continued to laugh. I punched him in the face. He was old and he withered easily to my blows. I broke his teeth and then his nose, and I hit him until both of my own fists were bleeding. But Mitchell just kept laughing. Good boy, he croaked through a cracking voice box. Good boy, you have become chaos. I delivered one more satisfying uppercut to Mitchell's cheekbone and tossed him over the edge of the walkway like discarded trash. He landed with a very satisfying smack. And then the scaffolding started to slip. I heard Tiffany scream one last time right before she fell. I saw her hand find purchase on the railing while her body drifted like a rag doll, 20 feet higher than the tallest aisle sign. That one moment of hope reinvigorated me. I rushed over to her, dove down, and reached out to grab the falling blonde, just like I had seen in all my favorite action scenes. But our hands didn't grab perfectly. I didn't pull her up into safety and save her life. Tiffany fell from 50 feet above the ground and landed on top of the aisle marker in dairy. She died instantly. 4:30. Alone in the darkness, the monsters will surely find me, and then they will see, and I will make them see. I wrote that down shortly before the sun rose on January 13th. I thought that it might be my sign-off. The floodwater receded slowly over the hours. I couldn't see it from my spot on the remaining scaffolding, but I could hear it. The sensation seemed similar to somebody pulling the plug at the bottom of a massive tub. I wondered what horrors await once the water went away. What could be left? Extreme heat, desert-like conditions, and dried-up milk cartons. I knew that I wanted to die. I welcomed the idea more than any other possibility. My feet dangled over the edge like a child on a swing set. I knew that it could end with a jump. I just wanted to write it all down first. I only wanted someone to see. And quite suddenly a voice crackled over the loudspeaker. The man spoke with a patient drawl. He paid no mind to my impending fate. He spoke as if there were an audience of 100 shoppers listening.
Thank you for coming to Costco. This has been a test of your emergency readiness. The simulation between chaos and order is now ended. The candidate has been recognized and recorded. We kindly ask all remaining customers to proceed into the light.
I don't know what happened next. I'll never know because I never wrote it down. Sometimes I remember being pushed. Sometimes I remember the fall. Sometimes I think it's just imagined. Sometimes I don't remember anything at all. What I do know is that I opened my eyes to a packed Costco shortly before closing time. Bright white light drifted in from the overhead fluorescents. The warm sounds of chattering voices and nervous laughter filled the warehouse. A man appeared in front of my eyes. He held a crying child with one hand and a package of cherries in the other. Seriously, they're saying it's going to be biblical, man. I sprinted towards the door. I can't explain my reaction then because I didn't know what just happened. My memory of the past 24 hours had been erased entirely. Even still, it was as though the fiber in my being told me to run. It was an instinctual response. Get to the door, get to the car, get home, open your phone. I sprinted towards the checkout line with groceries stuffed into my hands. I caught the familiar brunette with a ponytail at the checkout line. I thought I recognized the elderly man sweeping the floor, and the rude businesswoman yapping on her phone, but that was a faint feeling. I took heed of the store manager telling me to slow it down. I only wanted to make it into the light. But just before I walked out the doors into the white wilderness and packed parking lot in front of me, a man grabbed my arm. He looked no older than 45. He wore a short-sleeved office shirt which seemed strange in this weather, with perfect blonde hair parted down the middle. He held a stack of envelopes and he eagerly stuffed one of them into my hand. When he spoke, it was with a slow, southern drawl and a timid tone that I just couldn't quite place at the time. "Congratulations, sir. Hath made us kings and priests." I smiled. "Revelations, right? Congratulations on what?" He smiled back. "Stay safe. This next storm could be the last. The good Lord may hit reset, but he will always need a player 1 and player 2 to continue." I thanked the crazy guy, took his paper, and I drove home. There I found 20 new notes and voice messages on my phone. February 5th, 2019, 3:30. This weekend's forecast calls for snow. Hey, who's the new weather guy? Until my little sister pointed it out, I hadn't noticed that the faces on the news were all different that morning. They all had the same look as the presenters that we were used to. Stuffy suits, parted hair, and plastic smiles. But I didn't recognize a single one. There was the usual colorful map of the area. but this time it showed what looked like an enormous black spiral swirling toward our town.
And as much as possible, remain inside with the doors and windows locked. Close your shutters to prevent damage to windows, and when you hear sirens, take shelter in the basement. If you do not have a basement.
I tuned out and pulled back the curtain, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was a perfect early fall day. Sounds like a lot of fuss over nothing. My father huffed and then turned back to his coffee. My mother and sister weren't so sure. They stared transfixed at the ticker running across the bottom of the screen. School closures, business closures, canceled events. I sighed and ran my fingers over the keys in my pocket. It couldn't have happened at a worse time. Just when I most needed my family's attention to be off of me, they were about to be on high alert. I would never get out the door without a million questions about where I was going. I would have to find a good excuse, because there was no way I could tell them the truth. My girlfriend Katie and I were going to run away together. Our town was the sort of place where sex before marriage was considered a deadly sin. Heavy metal was believed to be the devil's music, and games like Dungeons and Dragons were seen as a gateway drug to Satanism. Katie and I secretly enjoyed all of those things, and our text messages proved it. 2 days before, Katie's mom had snooped through her phone and called my parents about what she had found. All of them were in agreement. If people in town got even a whiff of what Katie and I had been up to, their reputations would be ruined. So what if we were 17 and had been together for a year already? What mattered the most was public opinion. The day after our parents told us that our relationship had to end, Katie and I started making plans. My car may have been a rattling death trap, but I owned it outright. Katie had $600 in her savings account. With that, we figured we could start over in someplace better than this. Someplace where we could be together. And who knew, maybe in a few months, after their tempers had cooled down, our parents would accept us again. Or so we thought. Katie liked the idea of Chicago. It was the nearest big city to where we lived, and we could drive there in half a day if we didn't take too many breaks. During our lunch break the following day, we planned everything out. Katie's family lived out in the country, and even if she was grounded, she would still be expected to hang the sheets out to dry on Saturday morning. She could discreetly prepare a backpack with the essentials, hide it in the laundry basket, and run out to meet me when I pulled up. We had agreed on 11 o'clock. Now it was 10:30, and even though it was a 20-minute drive to Katie's house, I still hadn't found an excuse to step out the door. Although my father was older and on the heavier side, he had been a linebacker in college, and I didn't doubt that he would tackle me to the ground and take the keys by force if he suspected what I was planning. Still, Katie couldn't wait around forever. If she stood outside for too long, her parents would get suspicious, especially if they were also listening to this weird weather report. An idea struck me. "I'm gonna go put the car in the garage," I announced. "I don't want it to get damaged if there's any hail." While my little sister joked that a little hail damage might actually make my car look better, I grabbed the backpack that I had left in the closet and I slipped out the door. Seconds later, the keys were in the ignition. My heart raced as I backed out of the driveway. I couldn't believe it. Storm or no storm, Katie and I were actually doing this. I didn't look in the rear view as I turned onto the main road, but I could already imagine the scene back in the living room. My mom wondering casually what was taking me so long. Dad sitting up in his recliner, his dinosaur brain having finally put the pieces together. My little sister pointing out the window with a drama queen scream. Suddenly, none of it felt like my problem anymore. Doubts, panic, and second thoughts were circling around my brain like hungry sharks, but I was still confident that I had done the right thing. To distract myself, I rolled the windows down and turned on the radio. The message from each station was the same, more or less.
Get inside, lock your doors, and shutter your windows. When you hear the sirens, take cover.
The radio announcer's voice sounded uncannily identical to those of the newscasters that my family had been watching. Maybe they were all on the other channels too, whoever they were. Still, I wasn't the only one ignoring their warning. I passed plenty of cars on the way to Katie's. Most of the drivers looked as confused as I was. Where the hell was this world-ending storm that the media kept talking about? I tried to focus on what was important, getting Katie and getting out of town. Still, the further I drove, the harder it was to ignore the subtle changes in the weather. The wind picked up, bending branches and dragging dead leaves across the road. The temperature had fallen, and there was this smell in the air, but it wasn't quite like the cozy one that comes just before a rain. It reminded me more of a beach at low tide. Slimy, salty, and rotten. I cranked the windows up, switched off the radio, and tugged at my jacket. Katie's house was just ahead. Katie's parents knew what my car looked like, and there was no place to hide in the farmland surrounding their house. I had to assume that as soon as I could see their windows that they could see me, and after that it would be a race against time. The sheets were flapping in the wind when I came around the corner. Katie had to be outside already. I floored it. A red-headed figure in a black t-shirt and jean shorts was running through the fields towards the road. Katie. The rear screen door of Katie's house flew open. Katie's dad, a red-faced, overweight bald man in a tank top, stepped out onto the porch. He was shouting something, and although I couldn't hear him over the wind, the shotgun in his hands made the message clear enough. There was a deafening boom. Either his first shot missed or he was just trying to scare me, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out which. Katie hooted and dived into the passenger seat. I stepped on the gas before she had even shut the door. A minute later, Katie's dad was just a tiny hunched over figure in the distance, bent double from the effort of chasing after us. We had made it. Or at least it felt that way for a little while. Katie kicked off her shoes and stuck her bare feet out the window. We were giggling like idiots, drunk on the moment and happy just to be alive. I guess it's no surprise that we didn't notice how few cars were on the road by then, or how no one seemed to be doing yard work or walking their pets in the neighborhoods that we passed. We were still discussing what our first move should be after we had made it to Chicago, when Katie pointed out her window and said, "What's that?" The sky was still blue above us, but a massive black shape now filled the entire horizon to our right. It looked almost like a hurricane, except that there were no other clouds around it, and we were hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. As it approached, the land beneath it disappeared into darkness, almost like it had been swallowed up. "Look out!" Katie grabbed the steering wheel and turned hard. I had gotten so caught up in staring at the sky that I had almost run us off the road. I stomped on the brake and skidded to a halt seconds before we slid into a ditch. We sat in silence for a minute, our hearts racing, neither of us wanting to admit the truth. No matter what we did now, that shadow was going to catch us. It felt like I was waking up from a dream or maybe sinking deeper into a nightmare. There wasn't a single vehicle on the 4-lane highway up ahead. Even the rest area at the exit had its lights off. Katie and I looked at each other. For the first time in a long time, I suddenly wished that I had an authority figure, a parent, a police officer, anybody to tell me what to do, to tell me what was right. I took my foot off the brake, switched on the headlights, and aimed my wheels towards the highway entrance ramp. "Ah, screw it," I shouted. "Let's drive through." Katie nodded grimly. It was what she had been thinking all along. Sooner begun, sooner done. That was what our favorite teacher, Mr. Maysfield, used to say, and it seemed to apply here. The quiet and emptiness of the road was eerie. Even the drumming of my fingers against the steering wheel seemed loud. Neither of us felt like talking any longer. We just wanted to get to the other side of that, whatever it was, as quickly as possible. I gritted my teeth and kept accelerating toward the wall of shadow ahead. As we got closer, the silence was replaced by an awful mechanical howl. The sirens. If we had been in a city or a suburb, it would have made sense for there to be storm sirens nearby. But out in the middle of nowhere, on a highway, where could the noise even be coming from? And what was it that the news anchors had said? If you hear a siren get to a basement or the most sheltered room of your house, I was sure that it had been something like that. I had expected us to hit a deluge as soon as we drove into the darkness, but not a drop of rain was falling. The only difference was that the wind had stopped, the air was more humid, and suddenly it was as black as night. I tried to act calm and nonchalant for Katie's sake, but I was secretly praying to see another pair of headlights approaching up ahead. That way, at least, we could know that somebody else had survived whatever we were driving into. There was no one. The closest thing that I saw to a sign of life was a semi-truck pulled over on the side of the road. Its driver's side door hung open as though the driver had been too busy running for their life to close it behind them. Over 20 minutes had passed. The sirens, if that's what they were maddening. There was no end to the darkness in sight. Do you think we should go back?" Katie asked. I looked in my rearview mirror. The razor-thin line of daylight behind us seemed impossibly far away. I told Katie that turning around might actually be worse, although I couldn't have said for sure why I was so sure about that. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. If there was no one around for miles in every direction, then why did I feel like I was being watched? Reluctantly, I leaned forward and craned my neck up at the abyss overhead. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe an enormous yellow eye glaring back down at me, or some horrible, hungry thing with leathery wings. But of course, there was nothing there. And Katie wrapped her arm around mine, and I was grateful for her warmth. The further we drove, the darker it got, until it felt like the world beyond my headlights had ceased to exist. Apart from a pair of crashed, abandoned cars in the opposite lane, we hadn't passed a single trace of civilization. "We gotta get off the highway," I said, hating how shrill and terrified my own voice had started to sound. "It just feels too exposed." Katie finished my sentence for me and nodded. "Besides," she added, "we're almost out of gas." I glanced down at the dashboard. I had been so tense that I had barely noticed how far we had driven, or how low the orange fuel gauge bar had gotten. Fortunately, the red exit sign up ahead advertised food, lodging, and fuel. Supposedly, there was a gas station about half a mile to the left. I took us off the highway. I wasn't sure why I was feeling so uneasy about the whole thing until Katie spoke up. "Aren't those signs supposed to be blue?" she asked. And Katie was right. But if we turned around now, we might never make it to the next fuel pump. We would have to take our chances. The gas station's green and orange sign was bright, but it wasn't any brand that I had ever seen before. I pulled into the empty parking lot. The lights were on, but something felt off about their color. Some were a surgical shade of white, while others were the same dull red as the sign that we had seen on the highway. I switched off the engine and stepped outside. The asphalt crunched beneath my feet like fresh snow. There were no cigarette butts here, no discarded wrappers, no puddles of oily water. Whatever this place was, it was new. I rubbed my eyes. For some reason, I couldn't seem to read the text on the fuel pump. It was like the words were smeared or written in some language other than English. The machine beeped when I put my card in, and when I pulled the trigger on the pump handle, I could hear liquid flowing. From inside the car, Katie gave me a nervous little thumbs-up sign. While the gas tank refilled, I squinted into the total night around us. Part of me was terrified of making too much noise. Another part longed to hurl a rock into the darkness just to break the awful stillness. The pump hose clicked off, making me jump. I was just putting it back when Katie scrambled out of the car shrieking. She slammed the door behind her and clung onto me like she was drowning. It was a minute or two before I could make any sense of what she was saying. Apparently something had crawled into the back seat of the car. All she would say about it was that it was about the size of a large dog and that it skittered. I looked around nervously. Since Katie had screamed, the feeling of being watched had been getting stronger. I peered into those rear windows. There wasn't much to see in the dim light, but I had a hard time believing that something so large could hide in there, much less squeeze between the cracks of the unopened door. I reached for the door handle and Katie shrieked again, begging me not to open it. I sighed, told her to step back, and I checked the back seat. After 10 minutes of searching, even Katie agreed. Apart from our 2 packs and some trash on the floor, the car was empty. There was nowhere for something so large to hide. "I know what I saw," Katie kept repeating. She stood with her arms crossed as far away from the car as she could get without entering the darkness. She nodded to the gas station and asked if I had checked the locks. I shook my head. I had been so focused on filling the tank that I hadn't even thought about food or drinks. Nervous for a reason that I couldn't explain, I approached its pristine glass doors. They slid open automatically, invitingly, but something held me back. It was the merchandise. On the surface, it seemed like the same stuff found in any convenience store: magazines, snacks, and cold drinks. Beyond that, however, everything was wrong. The labels on each item were written in that smeared-together language that wasn't quite English, and the images on the packaging were even stranger. The picture on one brightly colored bag showed a woman laughing while what looked like maggots chewed through her face. The soda bottles on the shelf beneath contained reddish sludge, and the labels showed a 7-fingered hand slowly drowning in the stuff. I was still staring when an employee popped behind the cash register. They wore a work uniform with a pattern that matched the sign outside. A visor hid their face in shadow. Something about how their head hung low beneath their elbows reminded me sickeningly of a puppet on strings. They snapped their left arm around backwards in a wave. "Can I help you?" A voice whispered hungrily. It seemed to be coming from inside my head. I took a step backward. The ground stuck to my shoe in gooey strands. It had gone mushy as though the whole place was salivating, as though Katie and I were its next meal. "Get in the car," I screamed at Katie. She looked down. Her shoes had sunk into the asphalt up to their laces. It was the only thing that could have gotten her moving. Katie reached through the driver's side window and turned the key in the ignition. The motor groaned, sputtered, and died. A syrupy, rust-colored liquid spewed out of the gas cabin from beneath the hood. The engine was dead. Whatever I had filled my tank with, it wasn't gasoline. While I pulled my hair and thought about how screwed we were, Katie yanked our backpacks out of the car and grabbed a flashlight from the trunk. She switched it on and motioned toward the darkness. It was the last place I wanted to go, but my feet were sinking deeper into the asphalt with every step. If we stayed here any longer, this place was going to eat us alive. We ran until our muscles burned and it hurt to breathe. The dirt beneath our feet finally felt solid again. The grass brushing against our legs was itchy and real. The gas station still glowed in the distance like a lure. When we paused to look back at it, I saw something crawl out of the back seat of my car and onto the roof. It reared up and stared back at us. I couldn't find words to describe it, but it was bigger than a German Shepherd, and when it moved, it skittered. The flashlight's beam was already dim, and the thing had been sitting in my trunk for ages. I had no idea how much juice its batteries might have left. If it went out completely, what the hell were we supposed to do? Just keep walking blindly into the dark until one of us got hurt, or one of the things from this so-called storm got to us. In the distance, those strange sirens continued to wail. The sound actually gave me hope. If there were sirens, there were people. And if there were people, there would be places to take shelter. All we had to do was keep moving and pray that the batteries would last. I swept the light from side to side. We seemed to be in some sort of animal pasture. There was a beaten down fence just up ahead. Unless the road had switched directions, I figured it was somewhere to our right. Let's follow the road, I suggested. We'll be more likely to find a house that way, don't you think? Katie nodded, but it was clear that she had lost her faith in me. I couldn't blame her. Every decision that I had made had led us from bad to worse. Just this morning, we had both been at home with our families and daydreaming about our future together. Now we were lost in a pitch-black field in the middle of nowhere, with no food, no water, and no idea how we were going to survive the night. It wasn't long before I caught sight of something large looming on the edge of the flashlight's beam. It was an old 2-story farmhouse, with a wide front porch and a rickety barn out back. I figured it belonged to whoever owned the fields that we had been crossing. Katie looked up at me hopefully. As ominous as the place looked, it was probably our best bet. The flashlight flickered again, and this time it didn't come back on again until I smacked it. In what was left of its light, Katie sprinted up the farmhouse steps and tried the door. Of course, it was locked. Katie knocked, but there was no response. We circled the building searching for another entrance, but the back door was bolted shut and the windows were shuttered. All except for one. The kitchen window was wide open. The flashlight was truly dying now, and apart from some cabinets and a countertop, we couldn't really make out what was on the other side. "Hello?" Katie shouted into the gloom. "Our car broke down. We're lost and hungry. Can we come inside, please?" Nobody answered. The flashlight's beam was dimmer than ever. Katie shrugged and pulled herself through the open window before I could stop her. "Hey, wait!" I shouted and then climbed through myself. Inside was an ordinary country kitchen. Flower print wallpaper, hardwood floor, and big crockery jars full of flour, salt, and sugar. On the rear wall was a half-open door leading down to the cellar. And beside it, an old woman with her back pressed against the wall and an expression of terror on her face. Katie and I lifted our hands to show that we meant no harm, but the woman didn't react. She didn't even blink. The flashlight's beam was almost non-existent, and it was only when we got closer that we understood why. Her eyes had been gouged out. From the blood splatter and the position of the knives on the floor, I figured that she had done it herself, right after looking out the window. What the hell had she seen out there? With a shiver, I closed the shutters of the kitchen window. Katie and I didn't have the time or energy to give the stranger a proper burial, not yet anyway. We stashed her corpse on the cellar steps, bolted the door, and started searching frantically for another flashlight or more batteries. Once we had found what we needed, we checked the farmhouse room by room. As far as we could tell, the old woman was the only occupant. The power was out, but when we turned on the battery-powered radio, we heard the same presenters giving the same message as before.
Lock your doors and windows, stay inside. Get to the basement if possible.
The repetition was maddening, and it wasn't long before I switched the radio off again. In the following quiet, we could hear fat drops of something pinging against the tin roof. It could have been rain or hail, but I doubted it. I piled some logs on the wood stove and I lit a fire. We needed the comfort of its warmth and light, even if the smoke might give us away. We dragged a mattress into the kitchen, curled up beneath a pile of blankets, and fell into a deep sleep. I wasn't sure whether the sound of scratching against the cellar door was what had awoken me or whether I had just dreamed it. The clock on the wall showed 10 in the morning, but the world outside was still dark. I heated a can of soup on what was left of the fire and poured it into 2 bowls, and then refilled our water bottles in the sink. There were some weird black flakes in it, but it tasted alright. While we ate, Katie and I talked about the storm. She thought some kind of chemical spill was causing people, including us, to hallucinate. That would explain the gas station, the weird warning sirens, and even the old woman's death. I, on the other hand, was sure that it was something worse. Maybe even something that I had never seen before. When I look into that black sky, I told Katie, I think I know what the first person to see a volcano or a meteor shower must have felt. That this is so much bigger than I am, so much more powerful, and it's totally beyond my control. A whoosh of wind rattled the shutters. A low, mournful call followed it, one that almost reminded me of a whale song. What was? Katie started to ask before another gust cut her off. Branches snapped outside. A barrage of junk clattered against the walls of the farmhouse. The call, or whatever it was, sounded even closer, and it wasn't any storm siren. Whatever was swooping through the sky above made another pass, this time ripping off most of the roof shingles as it went. Katie and I huddled beneath the kitchen table, holding our ears shut against that awful sound. If that thing dived any lower, it was going to tear off the whole second story with it. The fire, I understood suddenly. I doused it with water from the sink and then scurried back to my hiding place under the table, wondering if I had been quick enough. The next call, when it came, was much further away. Whatever had attacked the farmhouse must have been larger than any creature ever before seen on Earth, but without any heat or smoke to attract it, it had moved on. For us, that meant no more heat, no more cooking, and no more light apart from what our flashlights could provide. All we could do was hold each other close and wait for the endless night to pass. I couldn't have said how much time had passed before we heard a voice outside the kitchen window. Hello? It sounded familiar but also distorted and warped somehow, like a bad recording. Our car broke down. We're lost and hungry. Can we come inside, please? I shuddered. Those were the same words that Katie had spoken while we were trying to get inside the house for the first time. Even the knocking on the front door sounded identical at first. Moments later, the whole thing repeated itself, only this time there were multiple speakers. They talked so fast that their words all ran together, and when they knocked, it was hard enough to shake the front door on its hinges. When that didn't work, they moved on to the window shutters. Whoever or whatever they were, there were a lot of them. I thought again about what the news anchors had said. Was this what we were supposed to be hiding from in our basements? Can we come inside, please? Please, 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 please. The voices outside screeched in unison, like some kind of horrible choir. I grabbed the hatchet from beside the wood stove and unbolted the cellar door. Katie asked if the coast was clear, and I answered that it was. We were halfway down the stairs before it dawned on me. Where was the old woman's corpse? Hadn't we placed it on the stairs just a few days before? I scanned the cobwebby shelves and stacks of rusty junk, but I didn't find a single trace of her. Not until I looked up. The woman's corpse was crawling across the stairwell ceiling, held in place by dozens of black, leech-like things that squirmed from within her wrinkled hands and feet. More of them pushed through her skin, arching eagerly toward us. The largest of them were wiggling in the sockets where her eyes had been. Her mouth opened hideously wide as she vomited several hundred more of the things down onto our faces. Katie and I screamed and swatted away the rain of cold, slimy creatures, but it was useless. There were too many to be sure that we had gotten them all, and whatever was controlling the old woman's corpse didn't hesitate. It dropped from the ceiling right away, clawing at us. I took a swing with the hatchet and I got lucky. The woman's skull cracked as its blade wedged into her forehead. More of the things pushed out from the wound, but she went over backwards, crashing down the stairs. As I followed her down to finish the job, I realized that the entire cellar floor was moving. Millions of those things covered it, rising and falling like a living tide. Katie and I sprinted back upstairs, where the hammering on the walls and incoherent screeching outside were louder than ever. If the old woman lived alone, it occurred to me that she had to have had a car somewhere. And what about the rickety old barn out back? I practically dragged Katie to the second floor. We found the woman's key ring on the nightstand, switched off our flashlights, and crawled onto the roof above the kitchen. Down below, we could hear the front door snap on its hinges and something, or maybe a lot of somethings, come crashing inside. We crawled to the roof edge, shut our eyes, and let ourselves drop. As soon as my feet hit the grass, I switched on my flashlight. Just as I had expected, there was an old pickup inside of the barn. We ran for it without stopping to wonder whether it worked or if we had the right keys. There were sounds of pursuit from inside the house, but we didn't look back. We didn't want to see what was hunting us, not if we could avoid it. The engine turned over on the first try. I ducked beneath the dashboard and floored it. The tires bumped over the gravel, and something crashed against the bumper, screeched, and then scrambled off into the dark. The long driveway ended in a 2-lane country road. I turned left, still hoping that we could reach the far side of the storm. The silence was only broken by the rumbling of our stomachs. "Those things were coming in through that woman's basement floor," Katie said suddenly. "And those news reporters, weren't they telling people to stay home and take shelter in the basement? What if it was a trap? What if everyone who followed that advice is dead now except for us?" I didn't know how to answer her. All I could do was keep driving past unpowered stoplights and lockdown buildings, with no idea of what was waiting up ahead. I was so used to the road being empty that I didn't notice the man walking down it until I had nearly hit him. He was shirtless and lurching straight ahead with his back to us. Even with our headlights shining right behind him, he didn't turn back. "Don't stop, don't say anything. Just drive around him, okay?" Katie whispered. She didn't have to tell me twice. As we passed, the stranger turned towards Katie's window, almost like he could sense her pulse. His skin began to ripple and hundreds more of those leech-like things burst out of it. I stepped on the gas, never once considering that the man outside the window might not be alone. We sped straight into a group of them. Suddenly, dozens of them were clinging onto the mirrors, scrambling into the truck bed and smashing their foreheads against the windows. Katie screamed at me to go, but it wasn't that easy. Not with so many of them throwing themselves beneath the wheels to stop me. Something snapped beneath the front tires and I finally pulled free. In the red glow of the taillights, I could see the crowd snapping their broken bodies back together and continuing on as though nothing had happened. I didn't look again. And Katie and I drove in shifts, only stopping when we needed to siphon gas or forage for supplies. Once I caught a glimpse of several long-limbed loping creatures running across the road. Until then, I hadn't stopped to wonder what the so-called storm had done to people's pets, or to the wildlife. On the 5th morning, we finally spotted daylight. That razor-thin line of blue was the most beautiful thing that I had ever seen. But as we got closer, Katie's enthusiasm began to fade. "Remember the gas station?" she asked. "Remember how when we found it, we were so sure that we were going to be okay?" "What, you mean it's too good to be true?" "I don't know." Katie squeezed my hand. Let's be careful, okay?" It was a weird feeling, actually being able to see again, even if all we could make out were low, shadowy hills. There seemed to be something in the road ahead though, and before we went any further, I suggested that we pull off and take a closer look. We pulled off beside a cut in a hill, climbed up the rocky ledge, and then crawled forward on our bellies. Down below, we saw what looked like a military roadblock, although the troops in their gear didn't look like any soldiers that I had ever seen. Here on the edge of the darkness, the damage didn't seem quite so bad. I could even see a few lights shining and vehicles moving around. On a road parallel to the one that we were taking, an RV was barreling toward the checkpoint. Searchlights focused in on it. A soldier held up his hand and gestured for the occupants to stop and step out. A family of 4 slowly exited the RV with their hands in the air. The soldier ordered them to turn around, and then lit them up with a barrage of gunfire. The impact of the bullets made their bodies shake like broken toys. All 4 dropped lifelessly to the ground. Katie gripped my hand until it hurt. She must have been thinking the same thing that I was. If we had kept driving, that could have been us. Those troops had just gunned down innocent civilians. Or had they? As we watched, streams of what looked like oil oozed from the murdered family's wounds. But both of us knew better. What we were seeing was actually thousands of those black leech-like creatures squirming away from their dead hosts. I was about to suggest that we continue on foot when I saw the drones patrolling along the border of the darkness. If we approached, I was sure they would do the same thing to us that those soldiers had done to that family. Moments later, there was a buzz of activity along the roadblock. Soldiers ran back and forth. An officer perched on top of a tank shouted into a walkie-talkie, and the drones all flew to a fixed point above him. I had forgotten about the crowd that we had driven through earlier. They were coming up the road behind us, and now there were 3 times as many of them. Sensing the warm lifeblood of the soldiers up ahead, they charged. It was total chaos. They were breaking the line faster than the troops could shoot them. With the drones focused on the action down below, the border of the darkness was clear. Before Katie and I could think twice, we ran for it. Thorns cut into our legs and branches scratched against our faces, but we didn't slow down. If we didn't make it across now, we never would. In the overgrown gullies between the hills, we couldn't see which way we were going, but I told myself that it didn't matter. If we just kept moving, eventually we would find our way to someplace safe. Real daylight shone down up ahead. Beyond the trees and bushes, cars were driving along a perfectly ordinary road. People were going about their daily lives, too stressed and busy to worry much about the pillar of darkness in the sky. Like Katie and I had been at first, they were probably convinced that it was just a strange-looking storm. They had their own problems to deal with, and they had no way of knowing the truth about the horrors lurking underneath. We didn't break cover until Katie spotted a semi-truck. She smiled, brushed off her clothes, and held out her thumb. I followed behind, trying to look cleaner and calmer than I felt. The trucker put on his emergency flashers and pulled off onto the shoulder. Katie and I hurried toward the passenger side door. The trucker said that his name was Zach and said that he didn't need any explanations from us. He didn't want to know any more than we had to, and he figured that we'd probably be lying anyway. Our thanks was payment enough. We climbed inside, grateful for the silence. The darkness on the horizon slowly faded into the distance. Katie fell asleep against my arm. I didn't wake her up until Zach announced that he was stopping for a meal at an upcoming truck stop. Some warm food sounded incredible. The last thing we had eaten had been a can of soup from that old woman's pantry. The memory of her empty eyes and the squirming creatures that had erupted from her skin made my face go pale. Zach noticed and gave my shoulder a squeeze. "I don't know what happened to you two, but at least you're getting far away from it now," he said. We walked together into the truck stop restaurant. The place was packed and the smell of hot grease made my stomach rumble. All Katie and I had in the world was the money in our wallets, but we offered to pay for Zach's meal anyway. It seemed like the least we could do. A waitress came by with a platter of steak salad, fried chicken, and french fries, and we dug in right away. I cleared my plate in minutes and was considering ordering more when I began to feel a little queasy. I wondered whether maybe I'd eaten too fast. From the look on Katie's face, she was feeling the same way. I clamped a hand over my mouth, but I was too late. I vomited all over the table. Among the sour-smelling, undigested bits of food were hundreds of those wriggling leech-like creatures. By the time I understood what I was looking at, they were already moving across the floor, headed towards the warm bodies of the other patrons. Zach screamed as one of them slithered up his face and into his eye socket. I could hear similar reactions throughout the crowded restaurant. Katie heaved as well, and when I finally dared to look, I saw more of the things dribbling out from between her lips. Disgust, shame, horror. No words could describe what we felt then. We ran from the restaurant, unable to face the nightmare that we had just created. This was exactly what the soldiers guarding the frontier of the storm had been trying to stop. We had brought something out of there with us. Sunset had turned the parking lot an ugly shade of orangish red. People ran past us, screaming, doubling over, hurrying to their cars. Most of them probably figured that they had brushed things away before any could burrow beneath their skin. But like Katie and I in that old woman's house, most of them were probably wrong. Sirens were approaching in the distance, and Katie and I knew that we had to be gone by the time they arrived. We squeezed through a gap in a chain-link fence, cut across a drainage ditch, and then climbed back behind the dumpsters of a strip mall. There was a sports bar, a tanning salon, a tobacco shop, and a dollar store. With enough trying, I was pretty sure we'd be able to bum another ride. The real question, though, was what then? Could we outrun what was happening to our world and to ourselves? 2 days had passed since then, and I'm still not sure. But the crawling sensation beneath my skin and the thin black line on the horizon are making me doubt it. The Nightmare Man dripped with sin and shadows. He had a smile like an infected wound and eyes that spiraled with darkness. He followed my family for generations. I don't know when it all started, when this monster started hunting my family, but the last time I saw my father, he warned me that the Nightmare Man would come for me one day too. I remember the night my father walked into my bedroom, his white shirt and blue jeans covered in red. I was sitting up in bed, terrified and sweating, a mere child of 7. I had heard the panicked screams coming from my parents' bedroom. I recognized the voice of my mother, filled with agony and terror. It sounded like she had been dragged off. The screams had faded into a distant point until they simply became inaudible. My nightlight cast the room in a dim yellow glare. "Your mother is dead," he told me, his eyes as flat and lifeless as if he were already in the grave. "The Nightmare Man killed her, Tommy. They're going to try to blame me for this. They'll put me in prison for life. But you need to know that I didn't do it. The Nightmare Man did." "Mom is gone?" I asked, horrified. At that moment, I realized the house had a strange smell to it, like panicked animal sweat combined with subtle notes of copper and iron. I wouldn't realize until I was much older that it was the smell of death. "Mom didn't follow the rules," my father said grimly, his face pale and gray. "Do you remember the rules?" I nodded, feeling disassociated and unreal. "Always wear a silver to bed," I said slowly, feeling my silver cross that my father had given me. And always make sure that a light is on." "Right," my father agreed, his voice sounding emotionless and far away. "The Nightmare Man hates purity. He hates silver and white light. He is a thing of darkness and impurity. You must burn away the darkness even if it hurts." "What did Mom do?" I asked, a sickening feeling rising in my stomach. "How did she get hurt?" My father put a cold hand on my cheek, lovingly clasping my face. "She didn't use the flashlight. She never really believed me because she never saw him herself. She got out of bed in the middle of the night. At first, she was fine, but then she walked out of range of the nightlight past the closet, and that's when he reached out and grabbed her." My father leaned close to me. I could smell the sweet, rank odor of sweat dripping off his skin. I heard sirens in the distance. My father shook his head grimly. "Then the neighbors must have heard her screaming," he said, talking faster and faster as if he wanted to get everything out before the end came. "Remember, Tommy, always keep a flashlight next to your bed in case of power outages. Keep multiple light sources around you every time you sleep, and always wear silver at night." The siren suddenly cut off. A few moments later, I heard insistent pounding at the door. Deep male voices started screaming orders. He looked at me one last time, taking a portable flashlight out of his pocket. I saw spatters of fresh blood staining its surface. He handed it to me with a grim nod. Like a man walking to his own execution, my father headed downstairs, his back slumped, his eyes ancient and haunted. A few minutes later, 2 police officers came upstairs, shining flashlights in my face. Blinded, I took a step back, blinking quickly to try to clear my vision. "Are you okay, little boy?" one of them asked, a disembodied voice floating beyond a tunnel of garish white light. I only nodded, feeling like my voice had been taken away from me. The other cop read something into his radio. There was a hiss of white noise before a female voice came over the speaker, staticky and distorted. "Backup's on the way," she said. "Homicide will be there in 10. "Hey, let's get you outside in the open air, okay?" one of the police officers said, putting his flashlight down and kneeling down in front of me. Still feeling unreal as if I were floating above my body, I followed the officer like a sleepwalker. I heard the other one walking down the hall, saw his flashlight beaming into the open rooms as he went. The 2 of us walked out together into the hallway past the bathroom. Next came my parents' master bedroom. I glanced inside on our way past. I saw a carpet of wet blood staining the hardwood floor. Next to the bed, there were only scattered drops, but near the open closet door, it reflected the dull streetlights like a lake of gleaming crimson. The police officer looked determinedly ahead, so perhaps that's why he didn't see what I did. The closet was not empty. I could see a serpentine shape moving in the back. It had long, spidery limbs that glistened darkly. It looked like not much more than a slightly less black patch within a featureless abyss. Its obsidian skin looked wet and dripping. Its emaciated arms and legs constantly twisted and skittered. I screamed as I saw it. The police officer jumped, whipping his flashlight around to face me. I just pointed with a trembling finger into the master bedroom, the scene of so much suffering. The closet door slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot. "What the hell?" the police officer cried, pointing his pistol at the closed door. "Come out with your hands up. This is the police." There was no response except for our heavy breathing. "James, I need backup." The cop standing next to me cried to his partner, who had gone in the other direction down the hallway, presumably to check the rest of the closets and make sure that nobody was hiding in them. But the end of the hallway stayed gloomy and quiet. We saw no bobbing flashlight or any sign of James. The police officer's head frantically ratcheted down to the end of the hall and back to the door a few times. He seemed unsure of what to do. "Stay close by my side, kid," he whispered, the pistol trembling in his hands as he continued pointing it at the closet door. With his other, he pulled his radio out of his belt and clicked it on. "I need backup immediately. My partner is not here and we have another person in the house. They're barricaded in the closet and not responding to orders." The radio gave a long hiss of static in response and then went quiet for a moment. I thought that the female voice would come back on the line, but instead, a gurgling laughter rang out through the white noise. The cop nervously stared at his radio as if he expected it to turn into a snake and attack him. He gave a long, heaving sigh and looked down at me. His chalk-white face seemed ghostly. "Do you know who's behind that door, kid? Is it one of your family members?" The police officer asked, his shaking hands ready to start shooting at the slightest movement. I shook my head, feeling disassociated in this ghastly and nightmarish world. "It's the Nightmare Man," I whispered. "He killed my mom and now he's coming for me." The police officer listened intently, drops of sweat falling off his nose and chin. He hesitated for a long moment, looking like he wanted to say something to call me crazy, but instead, he knelt down next to my ear. "Here's what I need you to do, kid," he whispered, the fear evident in his wavering voice. "Go downstairs and go outside. Tell any officer you find to come up to the second floor immediately. Can you do that?" I nodded, glad to get out of there. "I'll find you help, mister," I promised, looking up at the tall officer. He looked young, probably in his 20s. Looking back on it all these years later, I doubt that he had much experience. He slowly started walking towards the closet door as I took off down the hallway. I glanced back, seeing him sidestepping the last few feet, his pistol raised and held in both hands. "Come out with your hands up," he yelled. I saw the door fly open in a blur, but once there was a gap of about 6 inches, it froze in place, as if a video had been paused. Shadows like smoke crept up on the floor as thick as winter fog. The police officer backpedaled, nearly falling. He caught his balance at the last second. "Come out now." "As you wish," I heard the diseased thing rasp in a low, hissing voice. An inhumanly long arm shot out, the twisted black fingers wrapping around the police officer's arm. A gunshot rang out. My ears were ringing. I turned to run, hearing the cops' terrified screams echoing all around me. Before I fled down the stairs, I glimpsed him being dragged into the inky abyss contained behind the closet door, the sharp, spidery fingers digging through his skin and muscle like burrowing ticks. I flew through the open door, seeing 2 police cars parked along the dark and empty street. Their lights flashed constantly, sending blue and red light dancing over the nearby houses and trees, though the sirens remained off. I looked around frantically for help, but I saw no one there. "Dad! Hello, Dad!" I screamed. I wondered if the police had already taken my father away to the station. But where were the rest of them? I thought about the cop upstairs getting dragged into the closet, screaming and crying. A cold shudder ran down my back. "Is anyone there?" My voice seemed to fade into the cool autumn night. There was an eerie feeling of electricity in the air. Black clouds swept across the sky at a rapid speed, covering the world in a black blanket. As the wind whipped past, it reminded me of the voice of the Nightmare Man, hissing in low and distorted currents. I felt that the street looked different. It took me a few moments to realize why. I looked up, seeing that the streetlights were all unlit. All the houses, too, had their lights out. The only illumination came from the spinning lights on the police cars. It was a surreal feeling. seeing the empty, eerie world as shining with the harsh glare of the red and blue lights. I heard footsteps stumbling behind me. Terrified, I backed away from the door, taking slow and uncertain steps into the street. A silhouette fell through it. A scream caught in my throat, but I realized that it wasn't the Nightmare Man. It was the missing partner who had gone down the hall, the police officer named James. His uniform was slashed and covered in drippings of scarlet. He held his hands to his stomach as he lay gurgling on the front porch. His dripping intestines bulged out through a ragged tear in his stomach, uncoiling and slithering out like red snakes. "Help me," he gurgled, reaching out a blood-stained hand in my direction. I shook my head, feeling like I might throw up. I continued backing up. I hit something metal, realizing that my back was pressed against one of the police cars. "What can I do?" I whispered, feeling incredibly scared and small. With trembling fingers, he pulled something off his belt. I realized that he was holding his radio up to me. "Come, take it," he gurgled, coughing up more blood. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around and run. He tried to say something else, but instead a spew of scarlet shot out of his mouth. He crawled forward on the ground slowly, still holding the radio up with the last of his dying energy. There was a strange smell around the police officer's body, a chemical odor like ozone. Nervously, I stepped forward and I grabbed it with numb fingers. As soon as my hand had touched the plastic, the police officer's other arm jerked up and closed around my wrist. I instinctively tried to pull away in confusion and terror. His skin felt freezing cold. My eyes widened as I realized the layers of flesh were dripping away, revealing a bone-thin, spidery limb underneath. I looked up into the face of the Nightmare Man. He towered over me with his skin as dull and black as shadows. In the center of his pointed skull, a single blood-red eye stared out, dilated and insane. His skin seemed to be shivering and rippling, as if the darkness inside were fighting to get out. I felt lost as I looked into that totally alien face. Terrible visions washed over me. I saw myself burning alive, the skin melting and dripping. A heartbeat later, I saw myself with my throat slashed, my lips turning blue as my pupils dilated in death. Reaching blindly in my pockets in my manic and delusional state, I felt the small flashlight that my father had given me. My instinct screamed at me that it was my only salvation. As the Nightmare Man lowered his spinning face down towards me, I pulled away, clicking the flashlight on and shining in its enormous eye. Though the Nightmare Man had no mouth, a scream ripped its way out of its eldritch body. The inky shadows forming his emaciated, rail-thin flesh body rippled and spun faster and faster. The black skin of his head started to drip and rip apart wherever the light had touched it. A banshee wail emanated from all around him, radiating out of his skin. He struck out at me as sharp fingers like railroad spikes dug into my neck. I felt my breath get choked off. A pressure like a metal band crushed my windpipe. I continued shining the light on his body, hearing his shrieks of pain. And then his long and twisted fingers brushed against the silver necklace that my father had given me. The effect was instantaneous. There was a sound like sizzling bacon and an explosion of white light. I felt myself being thrown back onto the hard pavement of the walkway. The Nightmare Man scuttled backwards into the shadows of the dead house, screaming as he pulled himself along. A heartbeat later, he disappeared, leaving behind the smell of ozone hanging thick in the air. I ran along the empty streets for what felt like an eternity. I pounded on locked door after locked door, calling for help, but the entire town seemed deserted. I saw the thick black clouds sweeping by overhead, and I wondered if the Nightmare Man had somehow dragged me into his world. It seemed like the night never ended, though many hours must have passed by this point. The world stayed black and silent, as if no sun would ever rise here. Looking back, it seems doubtful that this nightmarish world had a sun at all. I had only my flashlight as a weapon against the darkness. I kept running in a straight line, not seeing a single person. All of the streetlights stayed dead and empty, and the houses all looked uninhabited. I reached the end of street after street, coming to the borders of Frost Hollow. Where the boundary of the town stood, the ground suddenly dropped off. Beyond it, I saw a void of total emptiness stretching out forever. As I stared into the abyss, I felt watched, as if hidden eyes stared back. I thought that I saw inky forms shifting behind the impenetrable curtain of shadows. The hissing of the strange wind in this dark world abruptly escalated to a wailing, a diseased gurgling. I spun in terror, seeing the nightmare man standing only inches away, his crimson eye looking down on me with fury. Melted strands of black flesh hung from his fingers and head, sluggishly dripping drops of dark fluid. "You will pay," the nightmare man hissed in a soft, reptilian voice that radiated from his glossy and writhing flesh. Before I could even react, he swiped his sharp fingers at my face. I felt a pain simultaneously burning and freezing eat into my skin as they drove 4 deep gashes into my forehead and cheeks, barely missing my eyes by a fraction of an inch. Bleeding heavily, I fell back, my screams mixing with the gurgles of the nightmare man. I felt my back foot touch empty air as I hovered over the edge of Frost Hollow, leaning down over that seemingly never-ending abyss. My arms windmilled as I tried to catch myself, but at that moment, the nightmare man lunged forward, aiming another powerful blow at my head. It barely missed me, whipping through the air like sword blades. Thrown totally off balance, I disappeared over the edge, descending into a freezing blackness that swirled and jumped all around me. I thought that I caught glimpses of strange, eldritch silhouettes blending into the darkness around me, spinning black holes and enormous dark stars that sucked in light rather than emanating it. All around me, dark snakes whose bodies seemed miles long slithered past, shadows rippling above shadows. An eternity later, I felt myself screaming, my arms striking out at nothing. Someone was standing over me, shining a flashlight down into my face. I opened my eyes, seeing police officers and paramedics standing over me. I looked around, realizing that I was laying on the edge of the highway at the border of Frost Hollow, sprawled in the breakdown lane next to speeding cars and trucks. I was covered in gashes and cuts. It looked like I had walked through a forest of pricker bushes, and the slices from the nightmare man still bled freely on my neck and face. A police car and ambulance had pulled over a stone's throw away, the lights blinding and harsh. They brought back memories of my time in the nightmare man's world, and I had to repress an urge to scream. "Can you hear me?" a medic said, putting on gloves as he kneeled by my side. I was breathing heavily, confused and filled with agony. "How did I get here?" I asked. "Where's the nightmare man?" "Who?" the medic asked, a confused frown crossing his face. I saw them wheeling a gurney down the pavement. "The nightmare man," I screamed. "Where is he?" I swam through consciousness and unconsciousness, falling back into a shell-shocked stupor. I felt cold hands lifting me off the ground. In my delirium and covered in injuries, I thought it was the nightmare man. I screamed and thrashed, kicking my legs and arms, trying to scratch and punch anyone close by. I woke up in the hospital restrained, my father in prison and my mother dead. The most memorable day from my childhood had come to an end. In the years since, I have followed my father's rules like a holy order. I never slept without lights turned on around the room, always wore my silver necklace and kept flashlights by the side of the bed. Despite these precautions on many nights, I still glimpsed a shadowy silhouette reaching toward me, held back only by a weak circle of light. But something else my father had said the night my mother died kept coming back to me. Something about fire and the Nightmare Man. Haunted every night by this seemingly eternal presence, I bit the bullet and I went to visit him in prison. It had been nearly 2 decades since I saw my father. The towering monument to concrete and razor wire loomed above me. The guards pointed me towards a partitioned glass booth with a phone. I saw my father amble in, looking as if he had aged to 50 years. His eyes stared blankly ahead, totally lifeless and devoid of hope, like the eyes of a death camp inmate. He sat down heavily across from me, sighing and picking up the phone. "Dad, I wanted to ask you about the night that Mom died," I said nervously. "I've been following your rules and it's kept me alive so far, but that thing won't stop following me, it won't stop hunting me. You said that it hates silver and white light, but then at the end you mentioned fire. Can the Nightmare Man die, Dad? Can fire kill it?" My father gave a long sigh, staring straight into my eyes.
"Do you know what they found in that house, boy?"
he asked, seemingly ignoring my question. I just shook my head, watching him closely through the glass partition. He looked sick as his wrinkled face fell into a grim frown.
"They found tiny pieces of at least 3 bodies, but no actual bodies.
I saw the papers during my trial, boy. I will never forget what I read.
Pieces of your mother's teeth were embedded into the closet wall,
broken and jagged and sticking straight out. They found one of the cop's eyes inside of a light bulb, with the optic nerve still connected to the wall socket. There were broken pieces of bloody fingernails embedded in the floor and walls, but no matter how hard CSI looked, they couldn't find more than tiny bits and fragments and lots of blood.
Does that sound like something that a human could do to you?
He spat, his eyes darkening into slits. His wrinkled face looked immensely sad and haunted.
I've spent my life in prison for a crime that I didn't do. If you're not careful, the Nightmare Man will do it to you too.
He feeds off the suffering and death as if it were food.
He's always watching you, even now."
"Well, what can I do?" I asked, feeling sick and weak. "Is there any way to stop this?" My father leaned close to the glass partition, a new sparkle coming into his sunken eyes.
"You know, I've always wondered that. Maybe I deserve this for being a coward. I should have tried to stop this years ago. I should have died fighting this monster rather than waste my life in a cell, slowly going mad, trapped in this tomb of concrete and razor wire. But maybe there's a way, maybe." Before my grandfather died, he told me about entering the Nightmare Man's world. When the Nightmare Man comes out, everything around him changes. The rooms, the walls, the sky. It looks like our world, but it's always dark and empty, only filled with the presence of the Nightmare Man and the bodies of his victims. Perhaps there in the darkness where his true form is revealed, he can be stopped forever. He can be killed. I don't know, but if you can end it, boy, you must end it. This curse cannot drag our family down to hell forever. I nodded grimly. "Well, I think I was there," I said. "As a boy, I got trapped somewhere else. It felt like I was there for days, but the sun never rose." "You need to fight fire with fire, Tommy. Purify the Nightmare Man with the flames. End it, son. Avenge your mother and myself and kill this thing."
Over the next few days, I made my preparations to return to the Nightmare Man's world. I eventually inherited my parents' home and I still lived in it, despite the horrifying memories that hid there like childhood monsters creeping through the shadows. To my immense relief, I found that American citizens could buy military-grade flamethrowers without any sort of permit or paperwork. I gave a short prayer of thanks that I lived in a free country which allowed self-defense. After searching and emptying out much of my savings, I bought an XL-18 flamethrower which cost me a few grand. I figured the money would be well worth it if it saved my life. The XL-18 was a sleek black thing, a futuristic-looking metal backpack attached to a line that ran to the gun, which honestly looked more like something I might use for watering my lawn rather than burning demons alive. It appeared like a rigid and modified hose over a foot long with a trigger at the bottom. In addition to buying a flamethrower, I made my own napalm, which was surprisingly easy. I bought a couple dozen gallons of gasoline and experimented with it, letting equal parts styrofoam and cat litter dissolve in the gas until it became a thick, flammable sludge. As the sun set that final day, I filled the XL-18 with my homemade napalm, a rising sense of excitement crawling up my chest. I tried shooting it a few times, seeing a massive spray of flames extending out far in front of me. Satisfied and grinning, I headed back inside. Once the world had descended into total darkness, I crept upstairs to the room where my mother had died all those years ago, feeling the weight of the fully loaded flamethrower backpack. I touched the cross, whispering prayers that I would return alive and unharmed. Little did I realize the agony and suffering that I would experience the rest of my life after my fight with the Nightmare Man. I surveyed the dark, empty room, seeing the closet door stood ajar a few inches. Trembling and terrified, I took a step into the blackness, creeping closer to the closet. The door suddenly moved, swinging open with a low, drawn-out creaking. I heard hissing and soft laughter. The shadows swirled and danced. "It is your time," the Nightmare Man gurgled from the abyss. "Come and see me." I glanced back, seeing a shard of dim light from the hallway slicing in. The door back out to the normal, safe world seemed so far away, eternally far away. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the closet threshold, feeling freezing chills run through my bones as I entered the rippling black shadows. I heard agonized screams like the last cries of murder victims or the residents shrieking in hell. I wondered if these were the cries of the Nightmare Man's victims, echoes of past atrocities. I found myself standing where I just was, looking into an open closet door filled with an abyss of nothingness. The floor, ceiling, and walls of the closet had apparently disappeared, leaving only a portal of emptiness. I realized that the Nightmare Man's essence was everywhere around me, hissing in the darkness. He was the Colossus whose face hung over this strange and shadowy world. He was the juggernaut who would crush any who stood in his way to bone splinters and meat paste. A sense of paralyzing fear struck me like lightning. I looked around, seeing my house stood completely dark now. I had added a flashlight attachment to the top of the flamethrower and clicked it on, preparing myself for an imminent battle. "Where are you?" I screamed, glancing around frantically, my finger hovering above the trigger. "Come out, you coward. What? You can only kill defenseless women and children." Crying out seemed to shatter the fear that gripped my heart and make everything real. I stood in the moment, seeing everything with adrenaline-fueled concentration. The shadows in this dark world rippled and danced faster around me, sending eerie currents running through the floor and walls. Covered in sweat, I carefully headed in the direction of the hallway. I had barely taken half a step over the threshold when the Nightmare Man had attacked. I saw a blur of a tall, spidery shape soaring through the unlit hallway. I screamed, falling back as sharp fingers slashed through my arm and shoulder like knife blades. I tried spinning the flamethrower and its flashlight to aim it at the pointed reptilian skull of the Nightmare Man. Waves of adrenaline dulled the pain for the moment, but I could feel the blood spurting in warm currents from the wounds. "You will die like your mother," the Nightmare Man gurgled through his glossy skin as the enormous crimson eyes stared down at me, The dilated, insane pupil gleamed with amusement and insanity. Hurt and stunned, weighed down by the full backpack of napalm, I felt like a turtle stuck on its back. The Nightmare Man raised his scalpel-like fingers. They were twisted black things, each the size of a railroad spike. Hissing in his low and demonic way, the hand hovered above my face like the axe of an executioner. In a blur, it came down toward me, aimed at my eyes and nose. Instinctively, I let go of the gun and grabbed my silver cross, raising it above my face just in time. The Nightmare Man's flesh exploded with a flash of blue light when it smashed into the pendant. His hissing changed from one of bloodlust and excitement to an even more distorted cry of agony. He fell back, his inhumanly long-jointed legs thudding softly against the wood. I used the opportunity to right myself, grabbing the gun and raising it. The Nightmare Man's one enormous eye saw the weapon. Without hesitation, he lunged at me, flying through the air with two outstretched, monstrous hands. I pulled the trigger as he smashed into me. The flamethrower sprayed an inferno of burning napalm, like the breath of some fiery dragon. The napalm worked instantly, sticking to the Nightmare Man's alien body. The flames flickered and sizzled as the black skin of the Nightmare Man started dripping and falling onto me. Each drop was on fire and I felt my flesh melting. I bit down on my lip, trying not to scream along with the Nightmare Man. He rolled on top of me, spreading the flames further and further. I felt my arms and chest burning, smelled the hair igniting. There was a smell like searing pork chops as pain like hydrochloric acid ate its way through my muscle. The Nightmare Man rolled off after me after a few seconds. In a flurry of agony and adrenaline, I ripped the backpack off, rolling on the ground over and over to try and extinguish the flames. The Nightmare Man had become a 7-foot-tall pillar of fire by this point. Wailing in a distorted banshee voice, he slammed himself into the walls over and over. I heard the heavy thuds, the cracking of wood, an overpowering smell of ozone mixed with the odor of smoke and gasoline, filling the hallway with its cloying and pungent aroma. "Help me," I screamed, knowing that nobody would hear me except for maybe God. I saw my fingers and hands still burning and melting as my clothes melted to my smoking and blackened skin. I nearly lost consciousness from the indescribable pain, dragging myself toward the closet an inch at a time. Waves of white light flashed across my vision, threatening to drag me down into a dreamless sleep from which I would never awake. Focusing on the intense pain to keep myself conscious, I continuously pushed myself forward. The last wails of the Nightmare Man echoed through the room. I kept my focus on the open closet door and the endless abyss waiting beyond. Without hesitation, I pushed myself over the threshold and felt myself falling. I struggled through moments of unconsciousness. At that moment, I saw little and understood nothing. I found myself back in the room where my mother had died. It lay empty except for a computer desk in the corner with a laptop and a landline on it. I crawled to the phone, groaning and weeping with every movement. After a few failed attempts to reach it from my place in the ground, I pulled the whole thing down and immediately called 911. "Help," I whispered through cracked, burnt lips. "I'm burnt. I think I'm dying. It hurts so bad." The woman on the other end said something, but I couldn't concentrate. A thick blackness kept rising up, a dreamless sleep without pain. I tried pushing it away, but as the 911 operator's words kept repeating on the other end of the line, it soared up and dragged me under. I remember flashing lights and men in uniforms leaning over me. It seemed like a nightmarish repeat of my childhood experience escaping from the Nightmare Man's world. I woke up a couple of days later in a hospital bed, most of my body covered in bandages. A doctor told me that I had received severe burns over much of my body. I would live, but I would be scarred and ugly for the rest of my life. They had also amputated most of the fingers on my right hand, saying that they couldn't be saved after the deep burns that they suffered. In the end, I found justice for my mother, but in the process of killing the Nightmare Man, I had sacrificed my own body and health. And while I may be bitter sometimes, at least I can sleep now without seeing that spidery silhouette staring out at me across the room.